Alchemy. People used this power to create various things. Some created powerful weapons and tools using magic stones. Others created medicine that heals wounds and diseases. A woman was trying to use it to adjust the water temperature and extract all medicinal properties by solidifying them too. But she ended up falling on the ground while another woman arrived to inform that there was another portion to be requested for the mortgage. It was when it fell on the ground that it ended up scaring everyone. That feeling of working in a Japanese exchange company non-stop and collapsing after realizing it was really something that happened even in that other world. She reincarnated and now should work for herself until her own death. But at that moment, an old man had given her another chance, and she had always worked until death, and he would guarantee another chance to start over in that world. The protagonist's name is Maria Ail, and now she wants to live peacefully. Years passed, a little kiss then, and Maria Ail was trying to talk to the village chief, saying she was there to pay all the fees. She is a girl from the farm of a distant village. The village chief says she did a good job and that she should not go out carrying everything by herself. It was already her second year, and now that he understands, it seems the relatives lost their lives, and she grew up always as a calm girl. 12 years had already passed in her third life, and now it was time since she grew up without abilities, living in lust. Far from that. She was stuck in that poor village, and all the people bring good work to Maria Ail, because she really could help everyone in the village. A woman gives vegetables to her, and Maria Ail becomes very happy with that. Maria Ail apologizes for having taken a lot. Here next time you would repair everything, but the woman says it was all right, that she is like an older sister to the child that was there, and was a great help. The child always tells Maria Ail that if she is going to cook something, she should call the child, but Maria Ail says she would bring it to her house after cooking, and right after that the child becomes happy. Everything was so affectionate there, like Maria Ail, that simple life is really not something bad. Then she arrived home, carried buckets on her head, took care of the land, then the cows. It was a calm life, and without leash problems, doing the work of both parents who are now resting. But she also decided to take care of all that by herself, and honestly she wanted to have more time to relax too. But right at that moment when she noticed her tool ended up breaking. It was a family treasure that was a tool. Maria Ail did not know what to do. Perhaps she should go to the city to buy better metals. But they barely have money to sell something. Without that tool she cannot weed the grass for the cow that was sleeping at that moment. The woman's cow sleeping so calmly at that moment made Maria feel happy that she hugs it, being an animal doing what needs to fill her because it is family too. Maria Ail had been holding back to avoid repeating her past life, but little by little she ended up adjusting the water temperature and extracting all the medicinal properties, making alchemy work and creating a pink potion capable of moderately curing severe wounds. It has been a while since she started practicing alchemy and has done very well, and perhaps that is of good quality. So it was time to dilute a little, and after that she managed to make some low-quality potions. Now with those potions, she could easily tell a story that she ended up finding. It was a good thing to find those herbs too, just in case. But she wonders how much she would sell those potions. In the past, she was so focused on making them that she did not understand the value. Now at least it should be good to pay for new work tools. Now it was time to be a good girl and go to the city. Arriving there were many people, and Maria Ail wondered where she should start trying to sell those potions. To prioritize her safety, the only choice was to go to a guild, and the adventurers, one seemed a huge risk, so perhaps going to the Merchants Guild should be the safest option so far. Entering there, she is well received by a receptionist who asks if Maria Ail would be there to sell potions, if it was her first time, and if she is a member too. All fees would be cut in half for members. But she decides to try to sell it once, and right after that, she managed to earn a lot of money, 4 gold coins and 8 silver coins. Then she wonders if by any chance the tools would not cost 10 gold coins, so she decides to take a look to verify what was happening. She goes to the tool shop and takes a good look at the tools, and the toolmaker himself said she has a good eye, that there was 1 gold coin, and asks if she brought enough money. But then she thought it was a bit cheap and thought about stopping and buying more things too. Then she starts to laugh and is going to keep asking what would have happened next. After returning home, she takes a stone and tries to enchant. It even seems the cow was talking to her. That magic stone that she bought once when the money was almost running out, she improvised a little with something that came at that moment, and now that it was the power, her tool that would work perfectly. She decided to use it with everything, preparing herself, and thus, after using it on all the grass, it starts to cut quickly. That was the power of an attribute that was infused with a magic stone, and that all made things become easier. and it was certain to make that whole farm work alone practically. It was to ask for work beyond death as long as it does not attract attention. Everything would be fine and should sell more potions next time to improve living conditions. With the magic stone giving various powers to tools, she can easily make everything work, but the tool ends up breaking. She cannot believe that this happened again. It was very close to dying from so much work, and yet the other tools were also breaking. That soon she realizes that the magic stone makes the tools not withstand that much power. Her efficiency plan ends up going down. However, Maria Ail is not someone who would stop there. She simply goes to buy another new one. But at that truth, after taking the coins, she realizes she ended up spending a lot and still has no more coins. Now she wanted to wait a little to not sell so many situations at once, but at that, perhaps she should go back to do it again. And so again she decides to go back to sell potions and magic stones and also apply for membership so that she can sell regularly. There was her membership card. The receptionist said it was convenient also for making payments, and soon she realizes she can also check how much money she has. But she realizes that money was a lot. The receptionist explains that the stone was bought for 30 gold coins and the quality was exceptional. Then she wondered how that could happen. So much money for that level of enchantment. Considering that question about the other enchantments, perhaps that should be incredible. You end up thanking for her service, but she says it was all right. Maria Ail now decides to leave, thinking she made a bit of money and would make perhaps more magic stones, and she wonders if the toolmaker should take custom orders. Meanwhile, the receptionist finds all that strange. In reality, to have an ability to read and write and understand complex dealings even more, the placed effects of the magic stones were very strong. The receptionist wanted to know from where the girl was getting that. The more she thinks, the more curious she becomes. Those low-quality potions results were strange. Since it is not the green color, the standard of potions was a calmer pink. She heard that medium-quality potions, when they fail, end up turning that color. But if that is the case, it is strange that all those functions work calmly. Perhaps she was diluting that. The receptionist was perceiving everything, while the protagonist thinks she does not care about that kind of thing. But she jumps on her bed, saying she was exhausted at that moment. The distance was so long and the path was so heavy that it was her own fault for buying many magic stones on the way back. At that moment, the arms and the legs will continue getting more muscular. At that time, it was time to use the magic stones she got, and Maria Ail decides to store her magic stones together to make her magic bag. A cheap bag that can store more than apparently due to the effects of the magic stones does not have that much power, but Maria Ail could always expand, and she had a lot of that. Now all the problems had been resolved. It was difficult to call herself stylish because of that, but now she has some magic stones left and wanted to improvise something to make water, a warm blanket, or even preserve milk, but now she should focus on fire. Cutting firewood was very difficult, so she always wanted to take from others, but that was it. So if she adjusts the heat, then even cooking would be good. So Maria Ail placed the order for a stove at the toolmaker, and when it was done, Maria Ail got excited, saying that one was perfect. The toolmaker wonders what she would do with that huge thing, so she explained that it was an oven. With that look, she can return magic stones of ice and fire into some spaces too. The ice could be moved through the right pipe to increase the fire, and remove a little closer to that, could adjust the heat, and now accidentally it will not burn the food. The entire yeast says it was an incredible magic, and asks if he could repeat some help. Maria Ail says it was not necessary, and that she has a bag at the end of the day, so then she can store the entire oven. The toolmaker thinks that a girl with a luxury item, like a magic backpack, he wonders if her family could have fallen into ruins. So back home, Maria Ail decides to cook, put the egg in the bowl, mix well, and thus prepare her cakes. When she decides to see it, she notices it had a good coloring and eats, noticing it was very delicious. She could not stop eating and could not return to the diet of the day she was having sweet potatoes. After eating the entire portion of sweets, she was excited, thinking about preparing pancakes whenever she wanted. Maria Ail was very happy that this kind of thing could happen and thanked her father and her mother. Now she could not leave those two in that way. Then, through the window, realizing that from now on, a calm life awaits her, and the rest could always watch there in the best way. But someone ends up knocking on the door. There will be this question that was happening. You perhaps were the children, this letter from behind, and perhaps she had followed the smell of the cookies. He is bad. They will discover about those magic items. They will want to make her cook, and thus she would have to work until her own death. So she would have to hide all that, or else her peaceful life will go away. Then she opens the door, saying she was not eating anything, But at that moment, some men appear saying that Maria Ail was completely trapped, and the protagonist did not understand what was happening. Then she asks why she was being pushed for something like that. The man says she was suspected of not paying her taxes, and that now she should use any excuse at the court. Not even Maria Ail believed that. The village lord asks what she was doing. Then Maria Ail says she made two. You sold some medicines or something like that. Then she realizes it was that. She will stop at the lord's house, who says she earned more than the occupation of that just by using those potions, and asks where she found that. Maria Ail said she ended up making the potions, and the man hit the table telling her not to lie. But it was exactly that. There are no others in the world, so she cannot even give a good excuse. Then Maria Ail says she would make the potion right there in front of them, so they believe. The men end up standing still, waiting for what was happening. She takes a flower from a pot, adjusting the water temperature, extracting the medicinal properties, and stabilizing the medicinal effects. After all that, the men are shocked to see that potion, realizing it was an intermediate pink potion that can moderately cure excessive wounds. He wondered what would be happening, and started to whisper, saying that definitely was an intermediate quality potion, the best they had until then, and there was no way anyone could get close to some intermediate potions in the royal capital. But then they say that the guild was noting that she was selling low-quality potions, and that actually was because she diluted it to make water, the mana fusion that was a loss. And so she demonstrates she can make low-quality potions too. It is just some handmade work that came from a rural village. But they cannot believe, realizing that was not just any work. So after all that, she decides to explain to the village chief, who says he was shocked by what was happening, and that he never thought she could make healing potions until then. In the end, the Lord decided that she will not face the punishment that would be imposed if she opens an apothecary shop in the city. The city has been without a mortgage for years and cannot be helped. The chief was more worried about her than anything. Maria Ail says it seems that now, and would have to give everything to her. And they will also give an empty shop to use, and the conditions seem even very good. She would even use it normally. Right after that, the cow rolls from one side to the other, denying along with Maria Ail. But at that moment, the village owner says not to worry, and to leave both the field and the cow to them. Then Maria Ail leaves, telling everyone to be careful, and right after that, she decides to kneel before her parents' grave. All the village approaches, calling her attention, saying that I become the village chief, and that he will move to the city. And now they learned a lot from her. So she should take all that they were walking as a gift, and that Maria Ail could always return. Then Maria Ail's aunt appears, and Maria Ail thanks for everything she did. After leaving her alone and taking care of all things, the aunt says it really was all very easy, and that she felt very lonely after her husband died, and having Maria Ail passing by there from time to time helped a lot. And disgust of that, there was also the child. Maria Ail told the child that she should listen to what her mother was saying. The embarrassed child says that Maria Ail was an idiot and that she should not try to return. Right after they realize it was not true what the girl was saying. Maria Ail said she would return to visit whenever she had the chance. So that was how Maria Ail said goodbye to all the village people and left. All that happened so quickly, and all she had were very good feelings about it, because she knew that she could live a calm life without working much and being an apothecary in the city. But arriving at that place, the shop she should be at was nearby, and it was a gigantic place with 2 floors. Maria Ail was shocked, asking what they were expecting, entering something for a 2-year-old child. That was much bigger than she was imagining, and perhaps she can make various positions by herself. But the idea with all that should be difficult, so she needs to travel with something to not work too much again. After talking with the receptionist of the Merchants Guild, Maria Ail ends up realizing they can make the contract based on commissions. Maria Ail realized she got their approval very easily, so she goes to deliver all she made until then at home and ends up placing several potions in a row in front of the receptionist, who gets completely lost, realizing she even has a magic backpack. Then Maria Ail says if she had better magic stones, she could make one with an even greater capacity. The receptionist ends up calling Maria Ail's attention, asking if she would be interested even in selling magic backpacks. Actually, she says, no, because she wanted to keep the main one as precarious. However, she does not have the materials, and the backpack's capacity could change depending on the magic stone and its size, so the price could change a lot. She says she could handle all the materials and the preparations and even the sales for Maria Ail. And there the receptionist asks if she wanted to start with just one. Then Maria Ail says perhaps she could make something at that point, and after thanking a lot, they would provide the materials for her when they are ready. Right after that, Maria Ail asks if she could take some potion materials, and obviously yes. They end up delivering some medicinal herbs to her to prepare more potions next time. Maria Ail ends up thanking, while the receptionist, after seeing Maria Ail leaving, ends up screaming with happiness, realizing at that moment she had gained exclusive portions and sales too, and that was very good. Then someone calls her attention asking what was happening. It was the owner of the Commerce Guild. The receptionist apologizes, saying she got carried away at that moment. The boss ends up saying they heard some things about magic backpacks that actually the receptionist was talking about, and there was a child. It was as expected from someone who was expected by the boss. The seller who was nearby ends up saying that was a very professor story, and the magic backpack she already has a decent capacity. But she said with better magic stones, she could make even better ones. Magic backpacks are rare at that point, and due to the fact that she can make high-quality backpacks, everyone was noticing the gold mine they had caught at that moment. Then the receptionist says she will get the best materials for that girl. The boss says it was all right, and later did not expect that even a receptionist could do something like that. The seller asks if he did not know that alchemy is full of secrets that not even the countries know, and they thought she was a simple mortgagee. And if possible, an apothecary is one who can create magic items too. From now on, they should report all that for their own reason to move forward. Obviously, they will create some alchemy materials at that moment. The boss was thinking if she could continue as an apothecary for generations. But that girl perhaps is more than the boss can hold. Right at that hour, Maria Ail holds the leaves, realizing they were dead. Those herbs had no use, and the commerce also does not know how to store those herbs. Perhaps Maria Ail has no choice, and perhaps she should prepare to get an extra effort, because she would have to get herbs on her own. She decides to climb a mountain to check why these herbs grow in such high places, and then she needs to find a nearby place to get them in the future. Right after, as Maria Ail looks to the side, she notices there was a bear nearby, which was also expected. She ends up removing her cloak and demonstrating there was a magic weapon in her hands. It was time to test. The bear runs in her direction. She ends up counterattacking directly, hurting it completely, and thus she realizes that the weapon was incredible. She was excited when the toolmaker asked to make that type of thing, and since she was small, she wanted something that reached farther, and also opted for a weapon of that form, placing 2 magic stones to increase the power and the electric attacks. Now she could release with all the power of the magic stones. And yes, when the bear observes, he notices that Maria Ail at that moment was releasing an extreme power, and it leaves directly from her weapon, and indeed defeats the bear once and for all, creating a hole in the bear's neck. All that she learned at that moment was when she was reborn. Getting materials in dangerous areas was a basic skill for alchemists, and her master always taught that. In the past, she wanted to get more magic stones too. But that guy should be dismantled. Perhaps she would leave that with the Adventurers Guild while storing it in her magic bag. And right after she starts to find her medicinal herbs in that flowery field, she starts to take them all, realizing they were dry. So she takes a basket and starts to take all her herbs, saying that it should be something good for a medium-level potion, but then she notices something different. Maria Ail notices there was a moon herb that she never expected to find high-quality materials like that. An untouched area like this was never seen before, not even in Maria Ail's past life. She wonders what the other mortgagees were doing at that moment. Her crackling starts to appear, and then Maria Ail decides to stop a little to camp, taking out her oven from her magic backpack and preparing a very delicious soup. After eating, she notices that the bread placed in that soup was very good, but that monster meat from earlier. She also wanted magic weapons for better preservation of those meats. Right after, she wonders if, with the magic stones she got from the defeated monsters earlier, she could make something even decent. Maria Ail was at a point of having a more civilized life. When the sun rose, she ran to the Adventurers Guild, presenting the entire body of the bear, asking to dismantle it entirely. That was a big one, and there was no way to take that alone. Well, she says that was exactly what happened. The man starts to laugh, asking what kind of thing brings a child to that place. Then right after that, she says she can pay for the dismantling fee with the Commerce Guild card. The man cannot believe she was very young, and yet was a member of the Commerce Guild. She was starting to get interested, so he should get a drink after things are ready. The girl thanks, and they wonder why adventurers always act that way. Right after that, she should also join the guild. So he ends up presenting the papers so Maria Ail could fill them all out. She was so exhausted. After some time, in times like this, a bathroom with a hot bath seems perfect. Then she noticed there was someone observing, so she decided to look back, thinking it was just her own imagination. Right after that, no nearby mansion in the Merchants Guild, someone ends up talking to the boss. Write help making sure that there is a message, not marquee. The guild boss asks if it was about what they said about the child mortgagee, and that it was very fast. The butler says he would read that then the apothecary in question could be rare and valuable for the marquis, and even for the nation. For now, her skills would evolve and prove that she can give protection, and monitoring is that she was the message. The boss could not believe they were talking about the nation. For him to speak of that type of thing was such a responsibility, but who wanted to sign? But the child's shadow seems that the Marquis already took action ahead of that. Right at that moment, who was spying on Maria Ail was the Sword Saint. But anyway, with the Commerce Guild, she could make payments and check how much money she has, but then she notices there was a problem with her money. There was a lot of money, it seems perhaps. All the potions she sold last time gave all that, and she also used all the herbs to deliver what was a heap. She still needs to use that money responsibly to continue the economy. Then the Sword Saint asks if a child like that can really use alchemy. While Maria Ail was doing her shopping, going to the toolmaker, saying she wanted a refrigerator to be able to use in a bathtub. He says a bathtub could be a little difficult, and she says if perhaps it is because it is very big. Currently the economy was good, but she did not need to worry about the high cost. But the toolmaker says it was not that problem. With iron, even it would oxidize very quickly, and everything would start to be a little more broken. Then she wonders if there is no metal with water resistance, and then Maria Ail ends up remembering something. If she makes oxidation resistance, perhaps she could do the rest calmly, since she was already at a good reason to use the metal. The toolmaker perceives it was quite an offer, and wonders if she will really do that type of thing. Right after Maria Ail says it is all right if she borrows some ores that were there nearby to maintain, he says it was all right, but that she should not get so used to that. Meanwhile, the masters could leave there, just observing everything the girl was doing. Right after that, Maria Ail decides to remove all the extraction of chromium iron. She starts to synthesize the metals, and right after asks the toolmaker to use all the metals she just made. The swordsman asks if that was alchemy, while thinking he does not even know how to report that type of thing. Next, Maria Ail says, it is the less change the components with alchemy to make the iron resistant to rust. The toolmaker says alchemy was incredible, but that he was more shocked at the time the iron became calm without even heating. She says it was the extraction and the less too. She changed it a bit with her alchemy powers, but she cannot detail everything perfectly, so she will leave all that with the toolmaker. Then she says it will cost close to 20 gold coins, so she should be very patient. The toolmaker still says that the girl is not a mortgagee, she is more magical too, and doing all these things one after the other was incredible. Maria Ail says there is no way that happens. She would die from work if she did that type of thing that the toolmaker was saying, and that reminds her that she forgot a mission she took to make magic backpacks. So perhaps it is time to check what was happening. She also wants to take empty pots for the next potions. Right after she goes to a nearby shop and ends up getting the materials to make the magic backpacks. That seems a very expensive backpack, and even the magic stone was of high quality. Maria Ail thinks if there is something she can fix that. So, she ends up borrowing the same one for a moment and ends up using the expansion enchantment. Now, its capacity was 300 cubic meters, which was equivalent to 10 carts. Realizing that it was very calm, the receptionist asks if that was very easy, and Maria Ail says that anyway she was collecting the herbs from the other day and found even moonlight herbs. That adding more healing herbs, she ends up demonstrating a little more by taking sublimation of the synthesis and quadrupling the water magic, refining the temperature and adjusting too. She can make advanced potions. A blue potion of high efficacy is capable of healing even severe wounds. That was an advanced potion, and the receptionist noticed that she got it from Maria Ail. Ask her to be careful. Then the receptionist shouts for the guildmaster, who asks her not to shout while holding merchandise that could damage the merchandise. He wonders what that blue thing was, the ordinary receptionist any, and that Maria Ail made it in front of everyone. It was a backpack that can carry the weight of 10 carts and even high-quality potions that were there in front of her, using the power of analysis, and demonstrated all that at that hour. And it was not simply something that can be sold anywhere. The receptionist says they should put that for sale even in the royal capital, and how much she thinks it could be sold for. Right after the Sword Saint, he ends up saying that Maria Ail definitely was an alchemist. But anyway, to make so many items like that and realize that people were starting to forbid, there is no way to follow with this thing. She was making nobles in another region, but she could even be kidnapped to other nations. They should obviously follow the Marquis's judgment. Meanwhile, in the royal capital, they were selling the potions that Maria Ail made, which were high-quality potions, and the rare item that he does not recall appearing on the market previously is that it was being started to be sold for 10,000 gold coins. People say 20,000, 23,000, 40,000. It was the first time people were seeing potions advance like that, and obviously with the power to observe, there is a certificate that was difficult to believe. The Lord raises his hand, saying he will buy it for 150,000. That was 3 times more the price than the normal one was, and still, it was someone from the family. So besides that, they should start to prepare. The advanced potion said it could even repair lost body parts, and thinks it was a thing that could be kept by the nobles eternally, and that should be full of care too. He ends up taking the items at once and looks directly at the potion. Right after, he ends up asking me for a boy who was accompanying him to show his hand, and that is what the boy does. The missing fingers were true. They should heal all of them at once. The man ends up throwing all the potion on the boy's hand, which ends up being cured immediately. That was unbelievable. No one knew how that type of thing was possible. And besides that, there existed a magic backpack that had the capacity of 10 carts too. That was practically a national treasure. With that, they could transport many good things at once. So they start talking about 100,000 gold coins, 200,000 gold coins. They have to hold that in a strategic way. While the Lord says that suddenly the appearance seems a market item was not common, but someone was capable of creating that, they should investigate immediately. Maria Ail was taking her bath quietly in her corner, which was really the best thing she could do. She uses fire magic to heat that metal, then can prepare easily, thinking it would degrade calmly. So he deals with all those things later, and more still seems like a giant boiler than a bath. So they should start to prepare to get the shampoo, but she can make soapstone on her own using even her own hair. And besides that, after the bath, she says it was good to take cold water. It was very worth it to make the refrigerator too. Preserving food was important, because nothing better than milk or cold water. It was a civilized life she was living, and from now on she would have worked non-stop when she ended up alone, but now she could live a calmer life. She was worried she could work until death again, but these things were starting to get worse without any anxiety. She is just going to continue making potions in a calm way and should live a slower life. Then someone ends up knocking on the door and Maria Ail decides to answer, wondering who it was. It was the Sword Saint, a man ordered by the Marquis. Maria Ail should follow along with him. Maria Ail is shocked, asking what was happening, and that this type of thing perhaps is for unpaid taxes. And then she asks if he is the guy who is trying to observe her from far away nearby. Maria Ail says she ignored the guy since he had no sense and no intention to kill her, and to think that a child like that ended up noticing him still saw many things to learn. Right after, Maria Ail asks if he is someone wanted kidnapped and throws that name of Marquis, then casually he says he is a legitimate king, and that ends up demonstrating the emblem, demonstrating he was someone legitimate for real. That was impressive, really. Seems very real, understanding how nobles work. He says that perhaps there is some reason to be thrown far away, so she decided to enter the carriage to be taken. Maria Ail was paralyzed and right after said that perhaps she understood something wrong. She was under the protection of the Marquis now, because now she will not be kidnapped, mistreated, or something like that. Maria Ail wonders why she would be protected, but it is because she thinks things were making sense at that moment. She performed high-grade alchemy without anyone being able to perceive it, and can even make advanced potions and also rare backpacks. Wait to swear the news that in the capital they managed to sell a backpack for a total of 650,000 gold coins, which was a lot. She cannot believe that type of thing was sold for that much money, and that it was very easy to make. Obviously, she operates on a different logic. It was not even a supreme potion, and the backpack cannot even hold 1,000 square meters. Is that he should be full that people can do that type of thing. But then the swordsman says there are no people who can do the same thing as her. Maria Ail asks what was said and he repeats, saying that there do not exist people who can do that type of thing, which was a shocking revelation for her. Alchemy that can produce advanced potions and high-capacity backpacks was a lost art, and then she asks what he was talking about. A long time ago, potions were demanded, started to transform into even an almost slave-like work, and all the alchemists were mobilized. They collapsed one after the other from working too much, and thus none remained alive. Then she wonders if it was a long time ago, and thought she would have been reincarnated right after she died, and then she asks from which time they are talking, and it seems it was more than 1,000 years ago. God should explain carefully. But if thrown straight like that, the archives that were passed down of knowledge appearance were also lost and cannot be replicated. The demand was the only thing they could do, so one can see the potions getting intensely expensive. Now, with that alchemy potential that was being protected by the royal capital, by the powerful nobles, they were researching immediate stabilization of expansion quality and the methods that were used to make. Then she wonders if there is a way to make advanced potions without the master, and that this has been more than 100 years too. Then the Sword Saint asks if she is really 12 years old, but that was not something to make a joke, that there is still a lot that could be important for the nation. She says it was all right and that she does not mind making a little impression too, but that now if she has 3 meals and can sleep every day, it was all right. Anyway, she always wanted to live a calmer life. Arriving at the mansion, a nobleman ends up saying that Maria Ail has come very far. She says it was an honor to meet him and ends up introducing herself as prepared to work for him. Her eyes shine while the Marquis says that perhaps that is a way for a whore face to get close, so he should prepare potions there to present directly, but it was not necessary. The Marquis says that from that moment on, he will guarantee her security and that she should do the work calmly. Understanding the situation, she says she was deeply honored, and then she asks the knight where she should focus, because she really does not have much to research, and the most important thing is that people do not understand the situation. So the basic rules should be legal and obedient. That is not something a 1-2-year-old girl should say, but it is something he will try to jump over. She says it was like that, or yes, nothing beyond that, and that there are still some imposition options very important for people. And right after that, she asks what the guy meant earlier, and it seems she caught his eyes. Then Maria Ail asks if she will be protected or not, because from that case his abilities are exceptional, but an alchemist directly under the protection of the Marquis is no longer a whore face from now on. Her title will be just that. She will live in a room in the mansion from now on, and everyone will know what she needs. That seems a calmer life. She did everything for today, so now she should take it calmly and rest. Then they end up entering the room, which was very large and chic too. That was a little extravagant for her, but that level of treatment was just natural for what an apothecary needs. Now yes, there are a few more things. So this yes can decide to say that she does not seem to understand. She was in a position that was addressed as Master Mortgagee, and that it was not much for a 1-2-year-old girl, so he could call her by her name calmly. She ends up trying to act all cute, while he says that he will also get the food and call her attention when it arrives. Right after that, they decide to talk directly to both the mansion owners about how much this swordsman is. He asks how the mortgagee was. The Sword Saint had said there were no problems at all, and thought she said that she does not like formal relations, and prefers to be called even by her name. I was not this way, that people have good manners with her. He said it was like that, and that she said earlier that it was the only more important option for people, and it was not necessary to think about that type of thing. So it was not necessary to be formal with anyone, and that they will be happy together. You want him to be very good. Besides that, she mentioned she does not mind taking some things along the way, and that it was important, and that was what they were desiring. But none in the Marquis' domain has so much talent, which means that at that moment the swordsman enters with everything into Maria Ail's room, saying that she will report to the royal capital immediately, but she just arrived there. Maria Ail was starting to get very happy to have a new calm life, and then this forever asks if it was not her who said she does not mind having appearances, but it has nothing to do with her leaving that place at the moment, and that she could teach everyone in the mansion there was no problem. But it was already said to Maria Ail that those with talent are kept by the nobles, and it would be best for the nation. But still, Maria Ail wonders if someone will listen to a child like her, and probably not. Right after that, she asks if at least the knight could help her feel a little better. Actually, the hot one looks at her and asks to stop calling him Knight, and that he could call her by the name Blaze. Right after, it seems he has a very navigator's life, and Blaze says it is true, however he cannot deny the things they say that were rude, so they decide to follow the path. Maria Ail cannot believe she was going to the royal palace, which seems ridiculous, looking at her past and the events that led her to think about how she got into that situation. There are still many things Maria Ail wanted to do. Still, she has not made sugar or cake yet, and wanted to help cure people and improve things. Right after, Blaze says making sweets in the royal palace, or asking the toolmaker those things, was something that was out of the question. But Blaze did not know what she was wanting to do in the palace. Then a hit happens, and they wonder why it stopped magically. 5 people were outside. They were bandits who were there to take everything they had. Blaze exits the carriage and ends up taking his sword. But who steps in front is Maria Ail, throwing a liquid on top of them and leaving everyone still. It was just water. The bandits got scared, and then Maria Ail raises her staff and starts to give me on top of them, which causes everyone to fall on the ground. It was a victory better than hair. I did not punch on Maria Ail's head saying she was an idiot and that she scared him and that she could not do that type of thing. Maria Ail dealt with much more dangerous things while trying to get materials. Dealing with bandits is just the beginner for an honest apothecary. Blaze asks what she is going to do with these people and that they could not leave them there. There were too many people to transport, so it was the area to tie up and report to the city, and thus they could take care of them. After tying up the people, Blaze says Maria Ail is really a good person at that, but that he was not trying to do things the right way. So it was time to move forward. Blaze says it was good that she can defend herself, but that next time she should leave it to him. Arriving in a capital close to the main one, they decide to stop a little to deliver the bandits, and also get excited for the better part of traveling. 16 check some shops, clothes, and even other things to leave in the field, not liking. Soon after walking a lot, Maria Ail was satisfied and jumped with everything on the bed, and on top of that she was in a wonderful inn. At that moment, she wonders if that was really very good, if a calm life in the palace was awaiting her. But then Maria Ail asks if she will have to use alchemy all the time, but that has nothing to do with alchemy. Actually, alchemy is activated due to the world lines, and if that is interrupted, it would make the technique become unstable. Now it was just to get the appendices. Maria Ail made them run during the capital every day, and they definitely would collapse at this point. The most important thing is that they are planning to arrive at the capital in just one day, so Blaze should rest. Maria Ail ends up falling on the bed and thinks that a lot happened in these last days, and gets sad 1,000 years later. The masters and the colleagues, even the rivals, to think that everyone already lost their lives when she decided to use alchemy for the last time. Perhaps she could find them at some moment. Not even if there was any success, she should find a way to use that. She needs to be sure that history would not repeat itself, so she should hold back for a calmer life. Then she ends up sleeping a lot, ends up waking up at the last moment asking why she was not woken up. Blaze asks if she forgot the words, but the most important thing is that, in things like that, he should wake her up always as he could. Then Blaze says he got bread for her to have breakfast, and thus, after eating quickly, she says she wanted to eat more food from that city. The most that now they should arrive at the capital on that exact day. Then Maria Ail asks if Blaze was speaking seriously. Right at that moment, without suspension and the wood and even iron wheel, she cannot sleep in that carriage. First of all, she was always complaining about the room being always luxurious, and now she was complaining about the carriage being bad. She does not know which moment she wants to. Blaze did not know what suspension was. Then she says she should make rubber wheels too, but first they end up needing rubber trees, but she did not have any idea. And then Maria Ail started to get tired. When she thinks that perhaps she should build a place to fly around, after waking up, Blaze ends up saying she managed to sleep. No matter how comfortable it had been from that moment, humans really can sleep anywhere, and that made most think that from the past life she could sleep even at work. They were almost arriving, and Maria Ail ended up trying to take a look out the window to check how the place was. The capital is very beautiful. Arriving at the Marquis's residence in the royal capital of Garanton, Maria Ail would live in that place. She thinks it is even the second residence that the Marquis already owned was incredible. Now that dinner is starting to get ready, Blaze asks if Maria Ail is just going to not eat, or if she will sleep again. Obviously, she says she will eat, so those two sit at the table. My food ended up starting to prepare. It was some other fruits of the type that Maria Ail eats, and ended up enjoying a lot. And from now on, she was living in a very rich family, because before she lived on a poor farm and ate potatoes. She thinks she will say she was in her third life, but right after she stops and says there is an example right in front of her. Right after that, Blaze says he would teach her to have more etiquette, because it seems she would need something as always. She seems more like a noble child who learns a bit of alchemy, and the candidates seem perfect. Maria Ail says she understands and says alchemy is just a lack, and they would use that as convenience until a job that would kill them until life. But Blaze tells her not to say that type of thing in front of people. But she says it was thirsty, and that nobles should do noble things and leave her alone. And she already can perceive that the nobles will not listen, and that was just a destiny Maria Ail would have to go through. She says her calm life is already gone. Right after the next day, going down to demonstrate a bit of the research place, she says there is no way to start working every day there, and dressing that way was also terrible, and that her family was very impatient. The research place was separate from the royal palace, so she does not need to be so tense. Right after that, she notices it was another magnificent place, and right when a maid enters, she already receives them, saying she was waiting for their arrival there. You ask what she was doing in the research place, and she introduces herself as Barbara, the youngest daughter of the family, and that she was enthusiastic to learn a bit about the research place. She was the administrator of the place, and also due to the family's order, they started to bring more about the main alchemist of the territory. Maria Ail ends up introducing herself and thinks it was to wait a little. She said she clearly is from some noble family and still would bring the leader, which means just Maria Ail. The maid says Maria Ail is exactly as rumor days, so it was to demonstrate the laboratory. Entering through a door, she starts to demonstrate, and everything needed to make the potions was already available, and she could use it whenever she wanted. She ends up thinking a bit about that and asks if they have moonlight herbs or spirit herbs, but the maid ends up getting confused and says she is not familiar with either of those two. Then the woman says they could use the proposed characteristics and search for anything. Maria Ail gets happy with that and says it was all right, but she starts thinking about making high-quality potions. Blaze asks if she can really make high-quality potions, and it is something she can research. The woman gets completely lost, but then hands over some water, a key, saying she could enter the laboratory when she wants, and that for anything she would be there. Maria Ail asks Blaze not to be so tense, and warns that everyone is noble, and that will be very exhausting. Right after that, she starts to take a look at the herbs she has there, saying she probably can make intermediate potions. But from what Blaze heard earlier, she needs moon and spirit herbs and any other thing to make high quality. That seemed very simple, but she says it is not simple because it needs the synthesis board. Blaze asks what that was. It was something she was mentioning earlier that he should have seen too. She explains it was something she did at the Commerce Guild and that he had seen at that moment. At that time, she simply used the synthesis board to increase the process speed for the advanced potions that require double synthesis. And with that, with more speed, she can make 4 or 5 from that moment. But he says she is very big. An alchemist should always be thinking about efficiency, especially for the sake of a calmer life in the future. The more efficient you are, the better results you can achieve. But work starts to go in your way. So she says she can extract all that. Right after that, she says the quality of the herbs really does not seem very good, and really she cannot make such high qualities in potions. But that was rude. The way the potions start to result is a variation, and that was made using the materials she prepared on her own. If she needs calm materials, and some end up drying immediately, with alchemy it should be stuck at the best possible quality. But he asks why she does not include the method of storing items too. That was a good idea. And for the moon and spirit herbs, they will need to aim for the freshest possible, and thus she would ask the reception. Now at the reception, she asks if that was the place. The woman asks if something is wrong, and then gets completely lost upon seeing high-quality and intermediate potions. Actually, what Maria Ail did was prepare an example to exemplify the relationship between fresh herbs and high-quality equations, and that was very useful. She should leave that type of thing there at the reception. But the woman says no, and that she would take against that, so she should never leave it in that form that most left previously. Now Blaze says Maria Ail is finally realizing how idiotic she was being at that moment. She was finally starting to get used to things. At the end of the day, they managed to make some things become more useful, but still would need more of a push. They have some things planned to do, and still should take care of the pain she feels from being in the carriage. Blaze says she could always sleep like she did last time. That was because she was very tired. The community of traveling by carriage every day was kind of depressing. The only thing one can do is the fastest, and thus the time would become shorter, and thus she could even make a speed magic stone without any power. But now, if making the foot of the magics, she would prioritize fire to have a calmer life. But then she starts to remember something, and Blaze asks what she had found. She just managed to realize she can make a carriage held up by magic stones instead of horses. But to make that happen, they need the technology to create more precise things. Blaze does not know what Maria Ail is trying to do. However, the royal capital has people very skilled and capable, and if she needs a toolmaker, Blaze knows one who would be very good. So they should go shopping now. If that works, she can even make boats, train tracks, or even other things that could do what she wanted, and it would be a total industrial revolution. Arriving at the tool shop, they end up realizing his name was Ted, and then he asks Blaze if he was there to get maintenance on his sword. It had been a long time since they currently lived. The mister who was in the kingdom's domain was looking for a highly skilled toolmaker. Maria Ail ends up introducing herself and says she was waiting for that type of thing. They end up shaking hands and saying they did not expect the other, but now that it is being said, Maria Ail needs several magic items for the city right at that moment, and wanted to ask the toolmaker for help to make that type of thing. Looking at those blue trees, it was clear she is not an ordinary person, and it seems she was already checking that previously. However, that would be very calm for him. He could calmly leave it. But anyway, Maria Ail says she has a spear used for high defense and asks if she could get maintenance. He says it was a really interesting piece, but he cannot understand why the alchemist would need that type of thing. She says she needs it in case she adventures into dangerous areas to collect herbs too. Right after, Blaze asks if she really did not put in a research request to collect herbs. She did that, but now thinking calmly, honestly, she cannot expect much from these people. Moon and spirit herbs usually can grow near dragons. The toolmaker asks if she was thinking of fighting to recruit adventurers, things like that, and if she was not too serious at that hour. But to collect herbs, it was necessary to be a high-quality alchemist. They say that was ridiculous, but still they need that type of thing. But now thinks about durability, realizing she was looking at some gold coins. They are planning to return a dragon, and Maria Ail says it really could help a lot, and now asks if she could make that sword, because she has a lot of money too, due to the sales that were made, and that was made to be used without any limit, and that he does not need to hold back, show the best work possible. The entire yeast ends up saying the husband was testing him, but explains he did not want to be a challenge to the limits. So, as it was interesting, everyone would demonstrate the best work the toolmaker could do. While Maria Ail says they could make the best existing magic stone and combine it with any type of thing, Blaze perceived that the entire yeast and Maria Ail managed to introduce themselves perfectly to each other. While Maria Ail leaves there at the end of the afternoon, she was with 2 magic stones, asking what was happening, and that she forgot the original idea to make that sword earlier, and that perhaps she will discover sooner or later why she wanted that. Well, anyway, using money with the economy in general ends up causing a lot of problems. Style was not something a 1-2-year-old girl should think about, but it is that she was very excited to finish that, and Blaze could also be happy. To tell the truth, Blaze was quite excited too. And then, arriving home, they end up thinking what they could do. In the end, they did not manage to get any moon herbs for her, and life was reduced to making intermediate potions until the limit of life. Then Blaze asks if that is not the calm life she was thinking about, but perhaps she wanted a bit of happiness too. The only thing he was looking at was forward, to build a better weapon, and thus managed to spend all time with a calm life. Then the maid arrives, calling Maria Ail's attention, and it seems some problem for her ended up arriving quickly. The disciples appeared on the way there. Even the court's daughter was going, and Maria Ail needed to be ready for home. That was out of nowhere, and the best of it asks what happened with the yes and yes. But they themselves should have consulted her previously. Then she starts to think she cannot take that situation seriously. Disciples was something that really had a difficult feeling, but then she started to breathe, and she attentively looked at the people who would be in front of her, hoping that would turn out all right. The woman in front with her disciples, Maria Ail, ends up welcoming and asking if he already knows her name, that she is head alchemist directly under the Marquis's commands. The 3 stayed quiet, and it was exactly as she thought. Then the maid says that even though Maria Ail is a young person, she still holds the record of constructing advanced potions, so everyone should respect her as if she were a professor. Right after, Maria Ail gets happy to see that he chose someone to be honest. Then some of them end up introducing themselves. The girl is called Alma, and that she never expected her master to be younger than the girl herself, and the embarrassed young man is called Layli. But at that moment, when she goes to introduce herself to the 3rd boy, he shouts, saying, "An ordinary girl cannot make potions," and Maria Ail gets completely irritated. Even synthesizing high-quality potions was very difficult, and it seems she can make advanced potions. Sincerely, that boy took years to succeed at medium-quality potions, and that left Maria Ail irritated. His name was Eduardo. The maid ends up saying Maria Ail really was a wonderful person, but he says he was speaking from personal experience. Alchemy is not something that could be understood at a low age. Then Maria Ail takes out from her bag saying all that would be a waste of time and asks if that proof was really necessary. Eddie says he should not be carrying high validity for that type of thing, but this is against the potion, saying it was supposed to be prepared first. But that makes Eddie think that perhaps it was impossible. Even high-quality nobles cannot obtain that type of thing. After some time studying, it seems they end up talking and say they finally believe in Maria Ail, so they could come for the main and to the outside, thinking a bit of the moment. Maria Ail ends up saying she will check the responsibility of each one and thus could evaluate and have the chance to succeed in the knowledge transfer ritual. At that moment, they end up thinking she would say that to their face, but apparently none of them need to have the chance to have complicated feelings. Then who raises their hand first is Alma, who decides to ask a question directly, asking what was the knowledge transfer ritual. Maria Ail says the knowledge transfer ritual is performed by the master and what seems to be the archives for a library. Lily asks what the library would be. The archive was more as if it were a system that alchemists know. They place their knowledge and experiences to refine more generations still in the history of life. To put in that type of thing of knowledge, one should be on par with hers, so it was super convincing. Alma says that was incredible, but once the master is practicing the probabilities, she should be creating high-quality potions. Eddie says that was ridiculous. Right after that, Maria Ail says the reason why she can create force indirectly is because she was accumulating knowledge until those who came before her, thanks to the archives, and that should be easy to understand. Now it was time to check compatibility with her, and they asked who wanted to go first. Eddie wanted to see for himself if she was telling the truth, and that he had no heavy feelings. So Eddie places himself in front of Maria Ail, and now says it was time to know their limits. But at that moment, the heads of the two seem to have bumped, and Maria Ail says that will never work, that it was the worst compatibility of her life. Right at that moment, Eddie turns with everything to punch Maria Ail, but ends up being held by being fallen on the ground, and right after who appears was Blaze saying, "That is enough already." Eddie runs away, saying the day will expose all of Maria Ail's true colors. While the maid approaches, apologizing, saying she would talk with him properly. Maria Ail says it was all right, that the problem went away, so that seemed very good. The other students get scared, and Maria Ail says it is calm, and that seems to be any problem with feelings against her, and that went much farther than it should. Maria Ail should have had that previously, but if the ritual succeeds, it is not just compatibility that also was crucial. Normally, the ritual performance is between two blood relatives, since the natural resonance was much heavier than that. Now that it was said, it was clearly low the chances, and it is because of that they are complete strangers. However, there are some exceptions. The students ask what they would be. Like her master of Maria Ail was not related by blood to her, but the master could demonstrate any mutual understanding. So they have the chance, as long as the resonance is compatible, they could build better selections from now on. And it was something that could happen perfectly. So everyone was perfectly fine. The master as cute as Maria Ail would be the best form than someone scary. Layli says he should be fine too, but they are happy and that she is cute is something of the sort. Layli just thinks he is lucky to have such a high opportunity in front of him, and his eyes end up shining intensely. When he became an alchemist, he would manage to save more people. In his eyes, Maria Ail sees in the small boy Layli as her master, and says it was all right and they could start after managing to synthesize. Between the two, they were understanding. Layli managed to become more compatible with Maria Ail. He gets excited asking if it was true, while everyone is certain for him. Maria Ail says his resonance was very close to hers, and that the archives can be passed. So Lily could live with her for a while. Once they become calm with each other, they could try the ritual. Right after they decide to eat a bit, and Maria Ail ends up trying to feed food into Layli's mouth, who says he can eat by himself, but if he should not be embarrassed, accepting things from others was really necessary. He says it was all right. Blaze asks if Maria Ail was not trying to advance things, trying to get together from one night to the next day. It was clear the husband was trying that. Blaze gets irritated, but he was completely restricted. Trying to approach forcibly was the problem, and the next one to have that problem would be bad. Maria Ail was being gentle and not finding it. Lily asks if it was all right for him to be treated very well, and that he needs to earn Maria Ail's trust, but he does not know how he should do that type of thing. Maria Ail says he should not worry about that if he does not understand the archives, so it might be a bit difficult for him. However, the resonance compatibility is determined by comforting the thoughts and values of the two. The fact that the values of the two ended up matching proves that he shared the same ideals as her master, who was an alchemist a long time ago. In other words, the archive already has his knowledge, and now that they should talk a bit more, she already feels as if she had her own choice that would be his. Lily gets paralyzed. Honestly, Maria Ail never thought she would find someone so quickly, thinking that was destiny, so she will not let Layli end up. Now that their rest was over, it was time to practice some training. They were starting to get worried about how much time it would take, and Blaze thinks things are getting much faster than he thought, and it was already time. For Maria Ail, it was time to try the ritual. After some time passed, even if they felt like they failed, time would take care of the two, so they did not need to be nervous. Lily says it is all right and that it was to take care of him. Now that they have the knowledge, they will test the culpability, starting immediately, and thus it is done. Lily Sergio. He feels all the wind passing between them, and when I open his eyes, he can see several books around him. They succeeded on the first try. Those were the archives. It was supposed to be difficult without any blood relation, but since it was a success, then they should be excited about that. The knowledge ended up increasing more and more. It was a strange feeling, as if the master was behind him. But when you share the archives, you will always feel that the other person was close to you, because it would take many appearances, and needs mental fortitude too, and a high family. Then Blaze asks if they will be okay. Lily spoke with you. He finally can do it. But that you incredible. But potions are important first. But he also needs to learn to make delicious cookies with the potions. He could heal the body, however without a calm life, the heart would not heal. And as her partner, he becomes someone who can improvise in aspects of life, clothing, food, and even security. Lily would do his best, saying her cookies really are delicious, and wanted to make a habit of making them by himself. It is that he was the spirit. No matter what the culprit may be, never forget to have a rest in one's own mind. Besides, he will work until death in the end. After laughing a lot, Maria Ail says now they could laugh, but she should make sure to be a patient who would pass eternal life, so that Lily and the future apprentices do not follow the same styles as the alchemists of the past. As long as the desires are passed forward, everything would be calm. Maria Ail smiles, saying it is because she was there, the history of alchemists would start again. After so much time training, Lily starts to get even tired, and Maria Ail says he still did a good job. After thanking, no one can believe what Maria Ail was doing, a high-quality training still. Right after, the majority asks if they were seeing the intermediate situations he made. It is just a reason why fresh ingredients are the best of quality. The archive can predict any knowledge, but constructing a body for a good amount of mana requires effort. The archives are saying that. Blaze asks if they were not practically training a lot, but Maria Ail actually said all that was because she already did it at home. To become an alchemist, the quality needed to defend too was excessive training of high defense. The knowledge that was stored in the archives was not limited only to alchemy, while material research and fighting monsters until that nature was starting to be refined to master some martial arts. While the others were enchanting their weapons, people have different physical abilities. Lily should find his own style of personal defense that he knows. He understands that situation, so he should try different methods. Blaze says he should be free to defend himself, but that was not something bad. And Lily was seeing a calm life in research construction and cannot always keep an eye on him. Right after, Maria Ail asks why Lily cannot live with them in the Marquis's house. They even tried to discuss that, but it seems they were under pressure to predict that the Marquis was trying to monopolize the students. Besides, the guards and other things were starting to bring private statues for him, and there are still some excuses to stop doing those more difficult acts. The rumors were saying that blood relatives have greater and easier abilities, so Lily getting close to the adult was starting to be more of a problem. Right after, Lily asks if he does not have a family, and how he could make those things work. And then he reaches the conclusion, you were asking if it was about them having a child, and that was very strange. But that was true. It would take years for the knowledge of the archives to be placed entirely, so it was possible. However, considering raising a child simply at that moment was extraordinary. However, for her it would only be about 15 years, because it would be very difficult. Blaze understands the situation, and says he should have said those things earlier. Maria Ail complains, saying to give her a rest. If it were easy to grow the number like that, then all alchemists would not be rare, and still the responsibility ends up increasing triple what it should be. Only if Alma became a patient, perhaps things would be easier. It was not that question if she would be doing everything right, and perhaps she was fine at that moment. Now they need to return to the status to report the other moments. And now Maria Ail wanted to give something to Lily. He asks what it was, if it was some type of food or something like that. It was soup in the most luxurious way possible. Blaze asks if there is a way to make that with alchemy, and perhaps alchemy makes things easier. Even the soup sold in the market probably is made from animals, and that would be terrible. But no one takes from what Maria Ail was saying. She was just sharing knowledge that only she was sure of. After, they end up saying they will see each other the next day, and so Maria Ail wonders, This boy got happy with the soup and perhaps wanted to try new things again, and so asks if he will prefer other clothes or something like that. Maria Ail gets excited. That is true. Not ask what would be happening. Right after the mansion, in the kitchen, Blaze asks if it was enough. He says no, and that he still needs to stir a bit more. However, the chef ends up saying to leave it to him, that he understands what was happening, and it was as expected. He was a professional. He was doing it perfectly. After making the sweets, they ate it to make it delicious. And at that moment they say they used a bit of cream too that was called a different cream. It was to be sweeter and also a bit tastier. When I tried honey, when I went to the fruit shop, I would change the flavor. However, the sugar required a lot, and the most important thing is that all that was luxurious that they could not get. Anyway, if only they could make the sweet be extracted. Maria Ail ends up saying to leave that with the master, and that he would make things in the most delicious way possible to teach everyone that way. The cook tells her to leave it to him. At that moment, they decide to go to the room. Maria Ail thinks about what she should do at that moment, which is time to make a mixer to help better in the kitchen. She thinks about making an electric mixer that did not even exist in Japan. The motor was permanently necessary at that moment. Extracting the ores was kind of difficult, so they needed more help too. Besides making that permanent to be electromagnetic, then turning the copper into liquids. Alchemy. But at that moment, she needs copper wire, and after some time she can make the technology that currently cannot make something so fine, and perhaps transforming the metal into liquid at room temperature using alchemy. Thinking about that type of thing currently seems to be something magnificent, and using lightning magic stones, she can do many things. But at that moment, who felt a thunder coming was Blaze, who decided to check what was happening. Maria Ail says it was just an experiment, and she managed to make permanent magnets, which was what she wanted. Now he needs to add one more coil and a switch, and the motor would be complete in theory. And now thinking about that, using the lightning magic stones is that they would not be so stable. Still, she can hold more power. But she keeps thinking and gets angry, telling Blaze not to play with the necessary parts, because he was hitting the ceiling and would be sure of what would be useful, because what she was doing could be interesting. From now on, the determination of what would be hers. Right after she loses the question if that was not more than enough, but he gets angry about that. After he decides to take a look at the points that the direction was the same, but that was ridiculous. Now, people could send those compasses, because it would be useful for navigation at sea or even getting lost in a dense forest, so they could patent that. The Marquis originally said to protect the inventions that were created, and never thought the first things would be other than medicine. They made the soap earlier, and now there is a second thing. If they patent this, it would generate a license, and soon it would become necessary. If that is true, it would be good for someone to commercialize that. However, the husband was feeling a bit guilty, since she did not invent that on her own. Understanding the situation, it seems that the world was a bit more convincing than doing the right thing. In the research place, the maid gets completely lost after hearing that they wanted to make an application for a patent, and finally all the results were being placed. Maria Ail says she was exaggerating, but it was not exaggeration. It was because they never had constant results without proportions. And now that after they leave, they have a difficult time, after going straight to Barbara to report everything that had happened. But she was surprised, because the alchemy was incredible. Everyone wanted a bit of soap too, but it is a bit difficult for someone to manage to transform that. And using the patent was also kind of complicated. Because of that, they wrote details of all the applications. Both the compass and the soap should be reproduced and without alchemy. Barbara said to leave the rest to her, because the products will be well prepared. And when they leave, they decide to buy a bit on the way. They decide to stop by the toolmaker, and Ted says he was also buying some of the things. He was teaching some new people, some techniques. So they decided to translate the soul, who was a person who now would become a tool. They already knew each other, and she was a candidate to be Maria Ail's apprentice. Alma was very happy that she was well. They ask what happened about her becoming an apothecary. After that, she was expelled from being an apothecary. I decided to transform into a toolmaker, but it was not necessary to worry. They just wanted to try different things. Someone who was having a third life doing apothecary for the second time was really something complicated. Maria Ail gets angry with that type of thing, and now, in that case, if she wants to stay with Ted, no one would be worried. No, besides, Ted was a man who was helping everyone a lot. Maria Ail gets excited about that. And then they ask if Maria Ail has time after that, because they just finished the thing she asked for. After much excitement, they end up going to see the sword that was wonderfully beautiful, besides being incredible too. They never saw something of that level. Maria Ail gets happy, takes the sword, saying it is huge, besides placing some magic stones. And now they ask if she can hold that sword like that. Maria Ail says it is not necessary to worry, and that it was for Blaze. He says not to be ridiculous, that he could carry his own things. But she says she already bought that, and obviously no, she cannot hold a sword of that size. Returning that would be a huge problem. Besides, very expensive. He apologizes, saying he owes a bit to him, but it was not necessary to worry. Now they should test the sword to check how it would be. Meanwhile, outside the capital, they decide to test the sword. And Blaze was in front with a weapon of both. They will realize what would happen. Blaze prepares, and now this way attacks with everything forward, breaking trees, almost the mountain along. Everyone says they were reading the imagination, until Blaze decides to return. Everyone seems happy, but he gets close to Maria Ail and asks if she is an idiot, that no one can imagine why a sword managed to cut a mountain in half. Besides that, they end up saying everything would be resolved, and that it was a waste. But that could not be helped, seems very disappointed. But now they decide to keep the sword, so after placing it on his back, then they say the sword was a bit intimidating. Next, he asks if he could borrow the cape, and Maria Ail decides to place a magic stone too, and that was very useful to serve as if it were a magic backpack. Alma ends up seeming that Maria Ail was incredible to do that type of thing. Maria Ail asks if there is something perhaps that could be done for Alma to help her move forward after all the problems. But the majority at that moment end up thinking it would be good to make the sweets, but Alma should focus a bit and learn her own work, to strive so much still, thus she did not have a rest either. Maria Ail gets irritated about that, and even he says that this stuff about not having rest was only hers, but that on the weekend he has distance that could take a chance. There is a question if it was true, and seriously, with the magic swords, backpacks, the things, they should apply a bit to be Maria Ail's students to practice a bit of alchemy too, and with her magic, she could help a lot. Besides, she was fired. Alma says she was never good at making potions, and not up to that, not being able to become Maria Ail's student ended up causing a lot of problems. So this is important. Told her she had no talent, that she could not sustain herself. So she just realized that manipulating those things was not for her. Trying to change weapons still would be very difficult to be an entire tool, but she says it was all right. Besides that, there was some serious problem. They would be enthusiastic about the talent and train properly so that she does not need to worry. It was a promise that. So the motivation was to leave it to Alma. Some days later, she decided to try Maria Ail's sweets, saying it was delicious. It was the first time she ate something very good, and she was excited about that. They were surprised that this type of thing would be happening, and never thought so much involvement would happen. A bit of time besides having quite a lot of sweets on the table, they could not let the abilities grow by themselves. The majority not only saw recipes for the head chef to cook, but also gave some extremely valuable kitchen items, and he ended up thanking them for the delicious food. Maria Ail ends up saying, also for the sugar it was calm, for the Marquis family to discover where it came from. Maria Ail used alchemy to revert a heap of fruit that she sees there to have sugar, and Layli helped her with everything, and perhaps they could use what would come for other things. To do that by hand, he would remove all the impurities, and that was extremely intensive alchemy. Alma also wanted to do a bit. Then Maria Ail thinks she could help her do something interesting. Since she was on rest, it was not necessary to worry. Alma decides to eat a bit of the sweets, saying that was impossible for her, because she had no talent for that type of alchemy thing. Besides, she could not be considered, but a candidate to be a disciple. That was enough to make Alma sad. But Maria Ail thinks of something, saying that extracting sugar was really something very easy. Even medium-level potions are more difficult compared to learning by oneself. Alma asks if it was true, if she really can do that. However, Alma was completely scared of doing that type of thing. Maria Ail asks if she could help, and obviously they want to try. But after trying a lot, that was very bad. It seems strange that something was very difficult without the archives. She really should try by her own constitution and keep trying again that way. The girl says she will try her best. Then they say they would do their best. And thus, after starting to test, some hours later, they finally manage to make sugar. And after trying, she gets happy. Alma says she cannot believe it. The quality changed a lot, which means she still has much room to grow. And then everyone was certain after that. Alma ends up returning to Ted. He asks how the day was. Alma ends up saying she made some sweets and that it would be interesting to deliver them to Ted's wife and daughter. Thus there is an explanation that she extracted the sugar, but she ends up choking and cannot speak directly, and says it was made with very rare sugar that is incredibly delicious. Ted says he was enjoying that very much, and now says goodnight. That night, Alma lay on her bed and was observing the magics around you. I realize that now she can do alchemy, but she starts to shake her head, saying she needs to focus on her tool making, even though it was said earlier she wanted to do something more. Her boss obviously would be disappointed. Right after, she says the next day she will start to do her best. After the next day, Ted was completely injured on the forehead and asked what happened. It was the sweets from the previous day that tried to give to his wife and daughter and ended up becoming a fight. Even the sweet that Maria Ail made was incredible. Maria Ail gets happy to hear that type of thing, and at that moment Ted says he could borrow a bit. But at that moment Ted asks if Alma is completely unnecessary in alchemy and just wants to let her be a toolmaker. Maria Ail ends up getting confused, saying she spoke with Alma the previous day. She was very happy about doing alchemy. That girl always considers herself in the strangest moments. So he had a favor to ask from Maria Ail. Alma was arranging things, and at that moment, Ted approached her, explaining he was cleaning there. Ted ends up saying he heard she knows how to do what now, but ends up denying perfectly and says it is uniquely a tool that has many problems. Then he says that Maria Ail ended up saying that type of thing. Keeping secrets was not something very good in the end. Ted asks if that is what she wants, and thus Alma says she can do alchemy. But Ted says that was not what he wanted. Ted just wanted to know what Alma wants to do more, and that he would respect her decision. It is not as if she had trained for years, so she does not need to worry. However, Alma ends up saying that perhaps she always wanted that she had motivation, was happy about that. That was the truth. But Ted already said earlier to Maria Ail and asked her to hire Alma if she wants to go there and work. It is fine. He has a lot of work he also has to do. Maria Ail would be waiting for her outside. Alma ends up holding back to cry, so she bows and leaves. Ted thinks that honestly she always was a very hardworking person, and Alma went out to meet Maria Ail from that moment. After some days, Alma decided to change jobs, and thus Maria Ail ended up hiring Alma, saying she would work as Maria Ail's assistant, and from now on she is happy to work with everyone. First of all, Alma would start working with small things and gradually would expand what she would be doing with alchemy. Layli would be her boss to teach everything she needs, and the boy would do so whenever he could. They end up calling Lili Sir. He cannot very much accept all that formality. And from now on, the more interesting jobs would be to get medicinal herbs, to learn to defend herself, physical training and knowledge. Alma asks if they are not going to make potions, and Maria Ail says she will not choose that for a long time, that she will always be choosing to walk through more than 1,000 years of stories that were archived, so she does not need to worry about learning things earlier. She always has to have patience and progress in her own way. Alma's way from that moment, the only thing she can do is extract sugar, so she will not manage to do the best that was Alma's specialty, and there was still a large mirror of hidden potatoes there. So, they should all help each other to do their best at that moment, to manage to go far. And right after they ask from where she would extract sugar, because she is even much better than Lili himself, who gets discouraged by that. And currently the majority decides to give a small reward to them, which were some sweets she made. Alma asks if she could eat at that moment, and obviously yes, they were also a welcome gift. At that moment, Lili asks if it was Maria Ail who made all that. Actually, it was the royal family's cook. They gave him a bunch of sugar so that he really could cook whatever he wanted. However, Lili noticed something in the archives he had never seen before, and it was exactly that. Even if what was given to them, he adds some more things, throwing forward they should leave it with the family's cook for future food in good hands. The maid, in the middle of that, brought tea and was amazed by what she was seeing. It was so incredibly sweet that she would see there that she had never seen before. Maria Ail asks if she will want to taste too. The maid asks if she can, but that it was not necessary to worry about her. And in the middle of that, who had already taken a piece was Blaze, who you asked if Barbara still never saw sweets like that. You wanting to take much attention could even cause problems. And at least if they could share among themselves, it was all right. Inside the royal capital, someone ends up being received at that moment. It was Marguerite, the lady and wife of the Marquis. She ends up coming down, well received by the cook. Then Marguerite says that after traveling for so long through the royal capital, they ended up finding something interesting, which was the cook. But the cook asks her not to say that type of thing, that a noble woman of the capital should always prepare for her tea party. That was true and heartwarming. She wanted to show them the latest dresses, teas, and paintings they can bring around. Since she lived on the frontier, she can always give her maximum at that moment. Right after, they end up preparing food, asking if she will want to eat after resting from the travels, and the woman says, thanking them that it was all right. That was new and seemed very cute and lovely, and besides, it was delicious. But then she ends up putting a cloth in her mouth, asking what that was. It was extremely delicious. The banquet of the royal capital of the desert had no comparison at all. Currently, the boss ends up saying he was in a collaboration with the alchemist, and after hearing the lady laughing, Marguerite says she won, that on the day of the tea party tomorrow it could be real. She would show something to them that was unbelievable. That night, Maria Ail ended up staying awake for a long time writing something. Lily says she seemed very sleepy, but also in the middle of the night she ended up hearing some strange laughs and could not simply sleep. But Maria Ail really should rest. She wanted to very much, but she was very close to finishing what she wanted to take to the toolmaker in the calmest way. Lily ends up wondering what that was, and after walking in the library, researching all the books, he realizes it was a steam engine, and it was exactly what he was thinking. All the alchemists of the future could bring the knowledge to the library, which means they will hold all the science of past lives. And it means that at that moment, Maria Ail also stored all the knowledge she had of science from her past lives. Obviously, such a high line of knowledge would not come only from her. There were some strange inventions, and that left Blaze completely irritated. Remembering when Ted demonstrated the first tool shop and mentioned the idea of a carriage without horses? That idea seemed ridiculous and extremely powerful previously, but considering the books that existed, it seems really incredible. And even Alma was excited to see what would happen. The students were very loaded at that moment, and now Maria Ail thinks that a steam-driven engine was big enough for a technological point of that world. And even if they hold back, eventually someone with sufficient scientific knowledge would try to do that. But Maria Ail, the next day, approaches the toolmaker and says she cannot hold back anymore. She is asking Ted to make those things for her. So she throws a bunch of papers on Ted's table, and he asks what that was. All that was magic stones, and also a steam machine that would generate rotation. The first magic stone would evaporate the water, then the second stone wanted to compensate again. The pressurization of changes would move the piston, which would be converted into rotation. So at that moment they would be making an engine that would replace the horses and would be the next point of evolution. Obviously here it cannot do more than just transport, as it can also store water to distribute using gravity, and that would be enough to put water inside houses, and it could also do many more things. Ted asks what happened about her being a mortgagee, and that she already made a sword, and asks if that was really a surprise. Obviously she has too much knowledge for just a 1-2-year-old girl, and that she focuses only on making potions, the work that would make her die. And also, Blaze says she could do other things, but that was completely different. They need tools to make Maria Ail's life extremely easier until she remains a youth, so she could calm down and live a calm life at more advanced ages, considering that before she died from so much work, she did not want to do that again until her more advanced ages. Ted says that was too interesting, and besides that, the structure was very incredible. Maria Ail was completely worried about durability, so she would use many magic stones to enchant that directly. Besides, bending seems very important, which makes the precision be extremely small parts, and that could be a problem. Maria Ail says making copper wires would also help the motor, so she came up with a solution for that, asking if he has small molds around to help. She ends up taking all those molds and extracting the iron and harmonizing, placing that inside the small molds, which leaves Ted completely lost, always asking what was happening at that moment. Because of that, he cannot understand and stays there under the bench to see what was in front of him. At that moment, she ends up taking out a metal wheel and says that as long as they can mold that, they could do everything with alchemy. Ted takes a closer look, and the factor that she can use this at room temperature was really insane. There were no air bubbles, no impurities, and also no inconsistencies. That was the perfect product of organization without any force of alchemy. That said, they cannot deliver anything very large, so she would leave the part to Ted, who says it was all right. However, even he was getting nervous, thinking he would not be able to do that. Blaze says out loud that he does not want to assume the worst, but that could cause many problems, just like the sword already caused. Maria Ail gets confused, starts to think, and starts to laugh, but Ted ends up touching Maria Ail's shoulder, saying she does not need to worry about anything. While they laugh, they look at Blaze, who had a completely strange feeling about that. Then, in the next few days, they ended up finishing their tools and said it was just a test of what they would do. Even a shield was taken in case anything happened. Maria Ail says it would be very good that Blaze could help them, and she would give the shield for casually happening, It was just to activate the magic stone and activate and protect by itself. That would help with the pressure and was to take any necessary precaution in case something bad happens. Blaze would be fine now that he has a perfect shield for him. Then Blaze looks at that machine and decides to activate the dramatic, and that started to move quickly the wheel after some time. Then it moved, and that all was a success. It was ridiculously a very perfect wheel now at the moment, but some noise was starting to happen in the shield, and he asks if everything is okay. Obviously it was stable, so it was all calm. They tell Blaze that everything was all right, and that now that noise really made him get scared, but everyone was excited so that it would not explode. So it was difficult to build, despite the problems. Still, they managed to worry about what was coming. Now they should let it run for the durability test, and all he has to do now is wait and relax until something bad happens. Right at that moment, the sky passed, and then someone ended up approaching, saying they knew it was Maria Ail. It was Lily and Alma who were there. Then they asked what they were doing at that moment, and why they ran outside the capital. Actually, they were causing some problems and a very loud noise all over the city, so they found out it was Maria Ail. Right after they ask if Blaze happened, and obviously he says yes. Then they decide to look at the motor that was perfect until then, and from when they saw in the archives, these things originally bring more black smoke. But it is because they normally end up burning fuel to operate, and the black smoke is released because of that, and it was a pollution. So that was the only way for them to be ecologically friendly. Stopping to think at that moment, the fact that it needs fuel and does not release any bad substance was practically something perfect. In our lives and past lives, in the modern city, pollution was really an intense problem. But importantly, it seemed to have reached all the way to the city. But then she thought about what to do. It was a vehicle, and obviously it had comfort problems. And then she asks Ted if he could make it more compact, considering regular passenger cars. They do not need to be so big like that, even 10 times faster than even a carriage. That leaves Alma very excited. But Blaze says that was not good, and asks if there is any problem to think at that moment. I am a horse, and to be faster than a horse, that would break the entire militia. Thinking things could get worse, and now they ask if Blaze is worried about that he already has magic backpacks, perfect swords, and sweets. Common sense was something they could use there, as if it were the wind. Besides, being an adult means having your own life to not release that outside, so there would be no problem at all. She is 12 years old in the end, and obviously things would resolve easily because Maria Ail was around. Seriously, Blaze could not think of anything, so they will take care of the responsibilities too. Meanwhile, in the research place, Maria Ail was solving her alchemy problems, generating doubled water magic, adjusting the temperature, and extracting all medicines. Now the poison potions and any cure was perfect at that moment. Laylee gets lost and says a different type of potion needs double the synthesis than the previous others, and if making them at the same time, everything would be easier. The faster Maria Ail works, the more free time they get to have a calm life. I already said earlier that the time they spend alone was very important. Laylee says that could be true, but he was a bit afraid, thinking that if he tries to write two things at the same time with different hands, it would be as if he never could do that type of thing. Besides, they made quite a lot of potions, and at that moment Maria Ail says the potions are not intermediate or advanced, and there is much more to learn. However, that was only with the materials that are unavailable at the moment. Now, holy water does not need materials that can be made technically. However, that really was a difficult time for her. Next, Maria Ail asks Blaze if he saw any zombies recently. He asked why out of nowhere, and if Maria Ail believed in those undead things. So she says to forget it. As long as those two potions win, no one can neglect the main work. So nothing was there. It was time to do her hobby. That part was the calm life. The machine seemed to be very well, and they asked what Maria Ail would do after. She just made the design of a carriage without horses, and now they will exchange the horses for the things they were imagining. If they pull the carriage that way, it would be like running 60 kilometers per hour inside a coffin that cannot turn nor stop, and it was still 10 times faster than a carriage. It needs brakes or else, because you will not stop and will not be able to control the vibration, so it needs transmissions to be able to handle the steering wheel too. That seems it was really a job that was about to start, and exactly they were entering territories where the books will not help much and need miniatures and tests to move. If not, it is just on paper and in practice. Probably they will stay like that for a while. And honestly, Maria Ail wanted to finish that as soon as possible to move to the next thing she wanted to do. If they use the motor to generate a turbine, they can generate electricity. Batteries are easy to make with alchemy, so that really could be done, helping electricity and giving more power to that. But now they cannot understand very well, but would be very excited for Maria Ail to be happy. Right at that moment, they needed to buy soap now, and also the world would turn easily because of Maria Ail's hobbies, but it was not to talk as if there was consensus on what could be done. They should focus on the main jobs and spend time on things that interest them only after. Right after, Lily decides to run a bit, and Alma says she will go too, but they need to change clothes. Right after, Maria Ail asks if they are going to run for fun or if they are going to train. Actually, they were in panic because they could not have that sufficient path. And Alma, yes, and she was a girl for the graduation exam, should bring back the spirit, and it was the only thing considerable as a mage, so he needs to get strong. At that moment, they need dozens of copies of himself to maintain their appearance. Blaze says, for example, he cannot approve of anyone who does not understand self-defense. Alma says that was exactly it, and talking about that type of thing, Lily was working a lot on self-defense lately, so it was time to move forward. In the middle of the city, the two end up talking, and Alma asks why Lily was keeping that as a secret. But it was not exactly a secret. He wanted to wait until he could demonstrate that. And Alma says that makes sense, and he seems really very cool when he can demonstrate those things. But it was not exactly that. Actually, Alma also wanted to demonstrate something. But at that moment, they pass by knights and wonder if something was happening. Swords were a bit cool. Then right after, the maid ends up appearing asking if Maria Ail was available. They ask what would have happened. Then the knights enter, saying that Maria Ail was arrested. She ends up getting confused and throws herself into Blaze's arms, asking what happened, and that she was already tired of that type of thing. Actually, at that moment, Blaze says the construction was under royal legal protection, and questions about which authority commanded them, and then they demonstrate they have permission. The church decided to put her on the path for being a heretic, and he wondered what would be happening. In the great cathedral of the royal capital, they were walking through the corridors, and Maria Ail wondered why she would be a heretic. She had been taken several times for protection, or for forgetting to pay her due taxes. But now she has no idea what she would be accused of. Still, the church obviously became grandiose during the 1,000 years that passed. In the past, churches were just small chapels that had religious water. Thus, alchemy to cure diseases or injuries is not very easy, and medicine was still very primitive, which makes people able to pray to the gods. Now, after entering the judgment, they end up saying that they would speak about her energy, defenders, and the observers remember her before the presence of God. The observers probably were around. There would be no shadow of a doubt that they were on Maria Ail's side. But wait, if someone was on her side, it was Blaze, who was there wondering what was going on with all those nobles. It was really very suspicious how many high-class nobles were there. Then they ask if she is Maria Ail, and the protagonist says, yes. A ball starts to shine, and they look at each other excited. That was the lie detector circle, which was a bit convenient. So then they go to the first combination. They say she forged a demon and a sword that melted a mountain, corrupted the nobility's sweets, and created iron beasts. But at that moment, Maria Ail got completely lost and did not know how to answer properly. She does not understand what they are talking about, and the first one seems like it would be the sword, but the rest no. Really, she does not understand. She says she made a sword, but the rest she would have no idea, only answers yes or no, and then she says no. At that moment, he ends up looking at the lie detector, which demonstrates it was a lie. The crystal detected that she was a heretic, and then she had an objection, saying that was a lie, even though she admitted the first part. At least ask one by one. The judgment had already passed. Objections for demands are not permitted, and if someone would have any desire for objection, should say something. Maria Ail thinks Blaze could say something, but when she looks, Blaze is no longer scared. Maria Ail asks what that guy was doing in times like this. He always had been following Maria Ail here and there. He would not have the chance that he would assume at the most important moment. But at that moment, the maid ends up giving an obvious observation, saying that as supervisor of the research, she was always perfectly monitoring Maria Ail's activities and is absolutely certain that those things were wrong. But the Lord says it was not as if she was together with Maria Ail at all exact moments, and that she could not prove that Maria Ail committed any crime outside her sight. Then the maid says that was perfect, and then tells Maria Ail she was right. She can make holy water and manage to read in the alchemy the alcove things used from the past. Maria Ail says she can make it, and asks if zombies appeared magically out of nowhere, and she knew that. She can prove she is not a bad person. Maria Ail manages to shine her head, saying she understood what was happening, That was simply because she did not turn her back on the gods. The holy water she wanted to create was as if it were the knowledge of the gods demonstrated. It was that saying Barbara was brilliant. Now they start to ask about what they were talking about. The Lord says holy water has not been made for centuries, and that she does not even know the basics and with the facts. Right after, Maria Ail asks if they cannot make holy water, and that at least someone with the modality of knowledge would be able to. Then there were no points in that church for existing. They get irritated, and thus, Maria Ail ends up taking water, not expecting that type of thing to have been done previously. It always works in her favor. So she takes a cup, and yes, places it on the ground, and says she is a follower of the Creator God. All of them end up freezing in fear, while she ends up conjuring words for God to deliver pure water. And then after managing to make it, Maria Ail ends up throwing herself back, saying she really cannot do so many things like that at the same time anymore. And now that he would be testing her faith more than any other ability, and it was difficult how much she really has seen the face of God. Besides, since they cannot make holy water, they should not call her as if she were a heretic. Everyone starts to think if it was real, it was shining intensely, and they remember hearing fairy tales about how it was made. The Lord says clearly she spoke the divine name, which the church keeps secret if someone from the outside knows his name, so that means they should approve them. But the Lord in the middle says no. The one at the corner ends up kneeling, saying that they were reading what they were thinking. Until the sleeping Lord says that was impossible, and said that is enough, that he will evaluate with his own hands. Right after, Maria Ail says he perhaps could be a very important person, and asks about what he was trying to do to transform her into a heretic. Right after, he asks what that was that had no precedence for that, and anyway, she still continues being a heretic. Maria Ail ends up saying, that makes no sense. Then she holds that stone in her hand and speaks about the Creator God, that person should not work until death, and Gui. Then they ask what that was. Maria Ail wonders about the name of God, saying if that type of thing was not supposed to be seen as if it were some trick or something like that, and any point of gaining a description of that type of thing. Then they realize she is not a heretic, but rather she is a blessed person. He dangerously was trying to give a divine punishment to everyone, and from now on, they started to cause more problems than what was happening. The person who should be questioned by the crystal, it was not her in the end. At the end of that afternoon, they end up leaving, and Maria Ail says that was a mess. The maid said it was all shocking, but that they managed to prove it in her absence, and that was perfect. So the demon sword really was the sword she built, and also the beast was the engine. And then they were wondering what type of corruption that was. Right after, someone ends up saying it was easy to tell from the capital's tea party she was calling sweets, and that it was made by an alchemist. Right after, who appeared was Blaze, who Maria Ail asks where he was. Blaze was doing some research, and she really demonstrated herself in the royal capital, because he was very frustrated, and it seems she managed to demonstrate many gifts from the other nobles. And right after, they managed to perceive what was happening. When the high-class nobles attended, they realized it seemed to be a false inquisition, so they tried to isolate the cause of the Marquis and pit both two against one another. At least that could not be done. Maria Ail says that was completely unbelievable. Then Blaze says he said he had a bad feeling about that, but that was corruption, and no matter how much he tries to make holy water, they would not manage to do it because of all these problems. The maid notices that Maria Ail was completely irritated during all the things that happened, and then they ask Blaze if he has ever seen the girl like that. The number of high-class nobles was really suspicious, so Blaze decided to verify. But as he was not a noble, he did not have much he could do about being in that place. However, as much as it is true, the maid managed to resolve it on her own, so she should understand the situation of what she would see now. But the maid holds Blaze by the clothes, telling him to apologize as soon as possible. Blaze understood that calling himself a guard and then leaving her alone was really a bad move. So he approaches Maria Ail, calling the girl's attention that as a knight he has no right to speak at that moment, and decided to try to find the more important cause. That is why he left that place. But he was more than confident that her self-protection ability would be self-sufficient, and that was unacceptable for a guard. Then he apologizes. Maria Ail ends up turning around, saying that in that case it was better for him not to make more complaints than the Ave Maria Ail do, then from now on, she would never learn. So Blaze asks her to simply do things easier from now on in this society, and Blaze has his own trial, and they no longer need to hold back. It is not as if she needed it to begin with. Right after, everyone gets excited to see Maria Ail being treated as if she were a holy lady. Everyone wanted to praise her from that place. Maria Ail just says, "Hi," It has already been 12 months since the things happened at the church. Some rumors ended up spreading, and everything made things become more difficult. It was not even officially recognized, but it is true that someone with the blessing to come, yes, was called a saint. When it was as if that type of thing made a happy idea. Because of that, she cannot leave the house without permission. Thanks to that, all the work started to have terrible progress, and it was not to be ridiculous. In the end, she finally got a profession to leave the house a little, and she built a lot on the frustrations to buy with the people. But now the majority had an idea. It was time to go on a trip to some place where the bombs had not arrived yet. But for Blaze, that will not happen, and Maria Ail asks why. Actually, her word became crucial for national defense, and everyone doubts she will manage to travel very far. That was kind of dangerous. In the middle of everything, the cities would not manage to invade the nation because of someone who was blessed by their creator, and that would give the divine condition to everyone who fled the map. Apparently, during the 2 months that passed, they managed to witness the study and create a ceasefire between the nations. They heard that the Royal Elite Army was currently at the border, and that was really very good. They managed to achieve peace, things like that. However, the truth should remain with the authority about the travel, but she should not have her hopes too high. Practically, she has a yes, she should push a bit more with luck. It was starting to get very hot, and it was also really very good. They could travel, they could find mountains, and even for Lily it would be a good test. Right after they asked if a trip to the Marquis's territory was really compromised, but he asked her not to be so stupid, and did she forget what happened when she arrived at the capital? See if they would talk about good things about how the things Maria Ail was doing reached good progress during these good months. They go to the toolmaker Ted and decide to talk with him a bit, but he ends up bowing before Maria Ail, and she asks to stop that right away. Then Ted explains he already finished the structure of the steam engine. Then she noticed everything was really very good, and it was already time to manage to make a horseless carriage in a miniature version. Once that is done, a trip through the Marquis's territory should not be a problem. It was really very large for a miniature. First, they will test it at the size of a car. Then they will see if it was complicated. They could naturally make it bigger. Besides, they wonder what would be going on with that thing, because it really has many mechanisms of a burning noodle. It does not have it very fast that the noodle is normal, and it has much more security among other things like that. They also have Blaze's body as the security. Still, the small size message made the small engine head and perfect, and he knew that. That was really very good. After testing a bit, they decide to go outside to make the final component. Blaze notices that he should test that, but he should not go very fast, and whenever he is prepared, he could jump. They should prepare for home in that plan, and Saint Blaze decides to test. He can perceive that it goes very fast, and everyone is praying for his well-being. That thing really was very good, but Blaze was feeling the wind, and they asked him to wait a little, because he believed he was gaining more and more speed. That guy really had many problems. Perhaps Blaze was a person who loved speed, and after some time, he returns as if it were nothing. And really, things are getting very good. They thought it would be 2 months of work. It would simply raise smoke, and they liked it. Blaze asks if he could keep that, but she would get confused and get very happy that he liked it. But that is just a prototype, really, meaning they still need many problems to solve. Ted says to leave it with him. Once they get everything right, he could make a perfect copy for Blaze to get excited doing, which was very not bad that he cannot show that to Laylee and to Alma at once. His character really got lost at that moment. Now, it was time to admit the bigger invention. Alma, Lily, wanted to test that the last time, but she should pay attention with her hands, since there was a huge sword for her. But now she was learning to be a buddy with Blaze. And now that they discovered a bit about the defense style, he was with all the merchants, another woman. Many martial arts were in the archive, so she should be careful. She should decide calmly. In the middle of that, Alma and Laylee end up talking a bit. He goes up a tree and decides to hit everything with the palm of his hand, which creates a small explosion. They did not expect that from Laylee. He broke a bit of the tree just with his bare hand, and right at that moment he was focusing the energy he gained. He asked the majority what they thought, was thinking they should stay calm at that moment. It was difficult to choose since he cannot simply hide the weapon. So everything started to get kind of worried, but the training suited him very well, and still what mattered most was fighting unarmed. Really seems very heavy, and even Maria Ail uses a spear, but that was of the type of a body that cannot reach so easily. Now they will prepare for the final exams, and Maria Ail ends up preparing, releasing an immense tree, and decides to release everything in the palm of her hand, which ends up exploding the tree once and for all. Everyone gets surprised, wondering how that type of thing happened, and then Blaze asks what was the point of holding back against the dragon. But at that moment, Maria Ail ends up talking about him knowing about the dragon, that the dragon's heart meat was really very good. To destroy it, that could simply lose all the taste. Everyone understands. But Maria Ail still thinks about how Layli's exam will take a while, and how they still have many problems to solve, also with the dragon's heart loads. Still, yes, they could place Layli as if he were a guard, and if he is just training, he could become a workaholic to grow. He also needs muscles to have a companion. Blaze says she seriously cannot take things seriously at this point. With the sword that Blaze of the Tire should be very easy for him to find someone of our level. Blaze says he has much to say about that, but she was serious about the test. He wanted to make only formal requests. He should take time. 3 days passed from that, so this is what was said. That bodyguard was literally released. Now Blaze could not believe that. Even if released as if he were a guard, an alchemist would have many problems to deal with afterwards. He knew the problems like that, and did not want to stop. Blaze was mature. They got a message from the Marquis that the immediate selection was indisputable, and the message said there were no other details. They arrived at that moment for Blaze, and they wondered what to take. They arrived. The maid ends up saying they were in the garden, and just to be careful. Blaze asks what happened, a selection that there was no way to follow. They probably were strong and a berserk who does not listen for any reason. But when they look, it is a woman, and Maria Ail gets shocked, wondering what was happening, if that was the same person. And the woman ends up walking towards them and stops in front of Maria Ail, saying no one could say anything at that moment. That person made Maria Ail's instincts scream non-stop. Shortly after, Leo explains that person was her master, and so it is. Knight ends up introducing herself as Elizabeth, and is appointed as Lili's guardian from now on. They could get to know each other, but things needed to be taken care of. And then, lights Beth and apologizes for all her rudeness at that moment. Maria Ail ends up playing innocent, saying not to worry, and that she really does seem like a very large bodyguard. Elizabeth was going to end up thanking, and now she will return to her duties. And at that moment he was about to leave. So she turns to Layli, asks to continue showing a bit of the place where they are. So when he proceeds, Elizabeth looks intently at Maria Ail. Then, as they walk through the corridors, Elizabeth asks if that was the alchemist she keeps hearing about. They hear that she is a very different person, and that she gives a completely complicated impression. Elizabeth starts to laugh. Until Elizabeth says that at that moment she was impressed by the maturity in that girl's eyes, and she was much more mature than many people. She truly was a calm girl, as Elizabeth's father described. So perhaps there was discipline for her. However, it was not how she understood Elizabeth's killer instinct. She also managed to have enough compulsion to reconsider. That in return, her father Elizabeth said he had good intentions to be interested in Maria Ail. She said then they should have a small conversation to see if everything was satisfactory. Blaze ends up wiping the sweat from his face. Maria Ail asks if everything is okay. He says he felt how intense that bloodlust was, but it was not really that. Maria Ail says she has no doubt her skills are very high, but it is that girl raised her rank simply by her own strength. Next, Maria Ail asks if Blaze knows that girl, and soon they ask if he was trying not to know. That was Elizabeth, the third princess of that nation. She is genuinely a real princess, so Maria Ail is shocked and asks why Elizabeth was a princess. It was just most remembered for the story about the patrols that were in the northeast that were withdrawing, praying to think about that kind of thing. Ever since Maria Ail obtained the divine blessing, the Northern Empire stopped attacking. Correctly, she was originally commanding that region. So, basically, thanks to Maria Ail, the world was becoming more peaceful, and the princess was in charge of border security. Basically, there is nothing left to do anymore, and making Elizabeth a bodyguard was something very bad. But no one was understanding the reasons for why that would be happening. A trained general and a princess had no doubts why Maria Ail's instincts were so alarming. Asked if she ever finished off a dragon in the graduation exam, and if they got the dragon heart meat for the plan. She was a princess, so obviously that cannot be done. Maria Ail gets irritated by that, and soon after the maid ends up approaching, saying that it seems possible. Barbara, with a letter in hand, explains, there is a letter that is a written permission for Maria Ail that includes Elizabeth, and that seems very interesting. Barbara ends up showing the letter while Blaze says he cannot believe that was happening. The letter says it was just a one-day trip and that everything would be fine. Apparently herbs are growing around the area too. That was practically a work trip, and they went to a distant village. That really seems very good for learning too, and collecting herbs was not too bad either. They realize Elizabeth spent a long time being his guard at a border, so Elizabeth probably was not in the mood to do this kind of thing. Maria Ail asks if the princess was going with them too. Blaze says her mother was around, so obviously she is going. So they could not simply travel peacefully as they always wanted, but there is no way to help that. They get the perfect excuse that noble women were with demonic sweets, and if they could win the princess too. But they could not use that kind of excuse, so it was just waiting a bit for the trip. After that moment, they could ask the cook to make some sweets as there is still a lot left over, and then ask Ted to make a fan to transport everything. And so things became very good. They noticed Maria Ail was starting to have her strange ideas again. They probably will go outside for a while, including the trip, and maybe make a portable bathroom here too. Soon they say they could go between the trees for that. Maria Ail ends up confused and asks about what he was trying to tell the princess. Maria Ail ends up tormenting Blaze for a while, and now they need transportation. So, since there was a lake over there, Maria Ail really wanted to swim. But the maid says there is no way to do that kind of thing as she is already 13 years old and should be careful. No one would know how they should take care of Maria Ail while he is swimming. She seriously thought nothing was the same. It was different. Now it was a perfect lake, and just looking at that width was really very bad. But shortly after, Maria Ail had a plan. The lake that was outside the royal capital, Maria Ail was walking there, and it was really very good having fun, as if it were a boat and a speedboat. Soon they asked the girl to be careful, and so she ends up crashing hard and falling to the ground. The people ask if Maria Ail is there too, and she says yes, only that the teacher worked out of order because he was just a small turbine. So it really would cause many problems to use that. It should be too much. Even though swimming was banned, she could enjoy the rest of the people a bit. But she starts sneezing, and it seems maybe she has a cold. After drying off a bit, they say she needs to change clothes and really go home. Only at that moment, Maria Ail's current clothes seemed a bit small too, so it was the perfect time since the diet was improvised. And they and she should leave that farm at once. Blaze asks if Maria Ail grew, and the soul gets angry saying she is making huge. Also, after a while observing intently, the truth ends up getting thoughtful. Everyone was focused on Maria Ail's life, so everyone should report if her height increased or not. Then, the soul ends up grabbing Maria Ail and taking her straight home to a store. They decide to go in, and the saleswoman ends up looking intently at the two girls, saying they were very excited and asks what they could do at that moment. After a while, she grabs a t-shirt that was very easy to move in, and that makes the soul say, "It is very cute." However, he did not want that kind of clothes, since they are going on an adventure. Maria Ail wanted some travel clothes and also something that was very good to move in during summer, as it was starting to get very hot lately. In that case, she ends up showing some fans that would be kind of bizarre, but currently Maria Ail ends up saying it. Thus there is an explanation that she extracted the sugar, but she ends up choking and cannot speak directly, and says it was made with very rare sugar. Thus there is an explanation that she extracted the sugar, but she ends up choking and cannot speak directly, and says it was made with very rare sugar. Thus there is an explanation that she extracted the sugar, but she ends up choking. Thus there is an explanation that she extracted the sugar, but she ends up choking and cannot speak directly. And thus there is an explanation that she extracted the sugar, but she ends up choking and cannot speak directly. And thus there is an explanation that she extracted the sugar, but she ends up choking. Thus there is an explanation that she extracted the sugar, but she ends up choking. Thus there is an explanation that she extracted the sugar, but she ends up choking and cannot speak directly. And thus there is an explanation that she extracted the sugar, but she ends up choking and cannot speak directly, and says it was made with very rare sugar that is incredibly delicious. Ted says he was enjoying that very much, and now says good night. That night, Alma lay on her bed and was observing the magics around you. I realize that now she can do alchemy, but she starts to shake her head, saying she needs to focus on her tool making, even though it was said earlier she wanted to. Thus there is an explanation that she extracted the sugar, but she ends up choking and cannot speak directly. And thus there is an explanation that she extracted the sugar, but she ends up choking and cannot speak directly, and says it was made with very rare sugar. Thus there is an explanation that she extracted the sugar, but she ends up choking. Thus there is an explanation that she extracted the sugar, but she ends up choking and cannot speak directly. And thus there is an explanation that she extracted the sugar, but she ends up choking and cannot speak directly, and says it was made with very rare sugar that is incredibly delicious. Ted says he was enjoying that very much, and now says goodnight. That night, Alma lay on her bed and was observing the magics around you. Thus there is an explanation that she extracted the sugar, but she ends up choking and cannot speak directly, and says it was made with very rare sugar that is incredibly delicious. Ted says he was enjoying that very much. Thus there is an explanation that she extracted the sugar, but she ends up choking and cannot and says it was made with very rare sugar that is incredibly delicious. Ted says he was enjoying that very much. Thus there is an explanation that she extracted the sugar, but she ends up choking and cannot speak directly. And thus there is an explanation that she extracted the sugar, but she ends up choking and cannot speak directly, and says it was made with very rare sugar that is incredibly delicious. Ted says he was enjoying that very much, and now says goodnight. That night, Alma lay on her bed and was observing the magics around you. I realize that now she can do alchemy, but she starts to shake her head, saying she needs to focus on her tool making, even though it was said earlier she wanted to do something more. Her boss obviously would be disappointed. Right after, she says the next day she will start to do her best. After the next day, Ted was completely injured on the forehead and asked what happened. It was the sweets from the previous day that tried to give to his wife and daughter and ended up becoming a fight. Even the sweet that Maria Ail made was incredible. Maria Ail gets happy to hear that type of thing, and at that moment Ted says he could borrow a bit. But at that moment Ted asks if Alma is completely unnecessary in alchemy and just wants to let her be a toolmaker. Maria Ail ends up getting confused, saying she spoke with Alma the previous day. She was very happy about doing alchemy. That girl always considers herself in the strangest moments, so he had a favor to ask from Maria Ail. Alma was arranging things, and at that moment Ted approached her, explaining he was cleaning there. Ted ends up saying he heard she knows how to do what now, but ends up denying perfectly and says it is uniquely a tool that has many problems. Then he says that Maria Ail ended up saying that type of thing. Keeping secrets was not something very good in the end. Ted asks if that is what she wants, and thus Alma says she can do alchemy. But Ted says that was not what he wanted. Ted just wanted to know what Alma wants to do more, and that he would respect her decision. It is not as if she had trained for years, so she does not need to worry. It was not as if she had trained for years, so it was all right. However, Alma ends up saying that perhaps she always wanted that she had motivation, was happy about that. That was the truth. But Ted already said earlier to Maria Ail and asked her to hire Alma if she wants to go there and work. It is fine. He has a lot of work he also has to do. Maria Ail would be waiting for her outside. Alma ends up holding back to cry, so she bows and leaves. Ted thinks that honestly she always was a very hardworking person, and Alma went out to meet Maria Ail from that moment. After some days, Alma decided to change jobs, and thus Maria Ail ended up hiring Alma, saying she would work as Maria Ail's assistant, and from now on she is happy to work with everyone. First of all, Alma would start working with small things and gradually would expand what she would be doing with alchemy. Layli would be her boss to teach everything she needs, and the boy would do so whenever he could. They end up calling Lili Sir. He cannot very much accept all that formality. And from now on, the more interesting jobs would be to get medicinal herbs, to learn to defend herself, physical training and knowledge. Alma asks if they are not going to make potions, and Maria Ail says she will not choose that for a long time, that she will always be choosing to walk through more than 1,000 years of stories that were archived, so she does not need to worry about learning things earlier. She always has to have patience and progress in her own way. Alma's way from that moment, the only thing she can do is extract sugar, so she will not manage to do the best that was Alma's specialty, and there was still a large mirror of hidden potatoes there. So, they should all help each other to do their best at that moment, to manage to go far. And right after they ask from where she would extract sugar, because she is even much better than Lili himself, who gets discouraged by that. And currently the majority decides to give a small reward to them, which were some sweets she made. Alma asks if she could eat at that moment, and obviously yes, they were also a welcome gift. At that moment, Lili asks if it was Maria Ail who made all that. Actually, it was the royal family's cook. They gave him a bunch of sugar so that he really could cook whatever he wanted. However, Lili noticed something in the archives he had never seen before, and it was exactly that. Even if what was given to them, he adds some more things, throwing forward they should leave it with the family's cook for future food in good hands. The maid, in the middle of that, brought tea and was amazed by what she was seeing. It was so incredibly sweet that she would see there that she had never seen before. Maria Ail asks if she will want to taste too. The maid asks if she can, but that it was not necessary to worry about her. And in the middle of that, who had already taken a piece was Blaze, who you asked if Barbara still never saw sweets like that. You wanting to take much attention could even cause problems. And at least if they could share among themselves, it was all right. Inside the royal capital, inside the residence, someone ends up being received at that moment. It was Marguerite, the lady and wife of the Marquis. She ends up coming down, well received by the cook. Then Marguerite says that after traveling for so long through the royal capital, they ended up finding something interesting, which was the cook. But the cook asks her not to say that type of thing, that a noble woman of the capital should always prepare for her tea party. That was true and heartwarming. She wanted to show them the latest dresses, teas, and paintings they can bring around. Since she lived on the frontier, she can always give her maximum at that moment. Right after, they end up preparing food, asking if she will want to eat after resting from the travels, and the woman says thanking them that it was all right. That was new and seemed very cute and lovely, and besides, it was delicious. But then she ends up putting a cloth in her mouth, asking what that was. It was extremely delicious. The banquet of the royal capital of the desert had no comparison at all. Currently, the boss ends up saying he was in a collaboration with the alchemist, and after hearing the lady laughing, Marguerite says she won, that on the day of the tea party tomorrow it could be real. She would show something to them that was unbelievable. That night, Maria Ail ended up staying awake for a long time writing something. Lily says she seemed very sleepy, but also in the middle of the night she ended up hearing some strange laughs and could not simply sleep. But Maria Ail really should rest. She wanted to very much, but she was very close to finishing what she wanted to take to the toolmaker in the calmest way. Lily ends up wondering what that was, and after walking in the library, researching all the books, he realizes it was a steam engine, and it was exactly what he was thinking. All the alchemists of the future could bring the knowledge to the library, which means they will hold all the science of past lives. And it means that at that moment, Maria Ail also stored all the knowledge she had of science from her past lives. Obviously, such a high line of knowledge would not come only from her. There were some strange inventions, and that left Blaze completely irritated. Remembering when Ted demonstrated the first tool shop and mentioned the idea of a carriage without horses? That idea seemed ridiculous and extremely powerful previously, but considering the books that existed, it seems really incredible. And even Alma was excited to see what would happen. The students were very loaded at that moment, and now Maria Ail thinks that a steam-driven engine was big enough for a technological point of that world. And even if they hold back, eventually someone with sufficient scientific knowledge would try to do that. But Maria Ail, the next day, approaches the toolmaker and says she cannot hold back anymore. She is asking Ted to make those things for her. So she throws a bunch of papers on Ted's table, and he asks what that was. All that was magic stones, and also a steam machine that would generate rotation. The first magic stone would evaporate the water, then the second stone wanted to compensate again. The pressurization of changes would move the piston, which would be converted into rotation. So at that moment they would be making an engine that would replace the horses and would be the next point of evolution. Obviously here it cannot do more than just transport, as it can also store water to distribute using gravity, and that would be enough to put water inside houses, and it could also do many more things. Ted asks what happened about her being a mortgagee, and that she already made a sword, and asks if that was really a surprise. Obviously she has too much knowledge for just a 1-2-year-old girl, and that she focuses only on making potions, the work that would make her die. And also, Blaze says she could do other things, but that was completely different. They need tools to make Maria Ail's life extremely easier until she remains a youth, so she could calm down and live a calm life at more advanced ages, considering that before she died from so much work, she did not want to do that again until her edible. Maria Ail was completely worried about durability, so she would use many magic stones to enchant that directly. Besides, bending seems very important, which makes the precision be extremely small parts, and that could be a problem. Maria Ail says making copper wires would also help the motor, so she came up with a solution for that, asking if he has small molds around to help. She ends up taking all those molds and extracting the iron and harmonizing, placing that inside the small molds, which leaves Ted completely lost, always asking what was happening at that moment. Because of that, he cannot understand and stays there under the bench to see what was in front of him. At that moment, she ends up taking out a metal wheel and says that as long as they can mold that, they could do everything with alchemy. Ted takes a closer look, and the factor that she can use this at room temperature was really insane. There were no air bubbles, no impurities, and also no inconsistencies. That was the perfect product of organization without any force of alchemy. That said, they cannot deliver anything very large, so she would leave the part to Ted, who says it was all right. However, even he was getting nervous, thinking he would not be able to do that. Blaze says out loud that he does not want to assume the worst, but that could cause many problems, just like the sword already caused. Maria Ail gets confused, starts to think, and starts to laugh, but Ted ends up touching Maria Ail's shoulder, saying she does not need to worry about anything. While they laugh, they look at Blaze, who had a completely strange feeling about that. Then, in the next few days, they ended up finishing their tools and said it was just a test of what they would do. Even a shield was taken in case anything happened. Maria Ail says it would be very good that Blaze could help them, and she would give the shield for casually happening. It was just to activate the magic stone and activate and protect by itself. That would help with the pressure, and was to take any necessary precaution in case something bad happens. Blaze would be fine now that he has a perfect shield for him. Then Blaze looks at that machine and decides to activate the dramatic, and that started to move quickly the wheel after some time. Then it moved, and that all was a success. It was ridiculously a very perfect wheel now at the moment, but some noise was starting to happen in the shield, and he asks if everything is okay. Obviously it was stable, so it was all calm. They tell Blaze that everything was all right, and that now that noise really made him get scared, but everyone was excited so that it would not explode. So it was difficult to build, despite the problems. Still, they managed to worry about what was coming. Now they should let it run for the durability test, and all he has to do now is wait and relax until something bad happens. Right at that moment, the sky passed, and then someone ended up approaching, saying they knew it was Maria Ail. It was Lily and Alma who were there. Then they asked what they were doing at that moment, and why they ran outside the capital. Actually, they were causing some problems and a very loud noise all over the city, so they found out it was Maria Ail. Right after, they ask if Blaze happened, and obviously he says yes. Then they decide to look at the motor that was perfect until then, and from when they saw in the archives, these things originally bring more black smoke. But it is because they normally end up burning fuel to operate, and the black smoke is released because of that, and it was a pollution. So that was the only way for them to be ecologically friendly. Stopping to think at that moment, the fact that it needs fuel and does not release any bad substance was practically something perfect. In our lives and past lives, in the modern city, pollution was really an intense problem. But importantly, it seemed to have reached all the way to the city. But then she thought about what to do. It was a vehicle, and obviously it had comfort problems. And then she asks Ted if he could make it more compact, considering regular passenger cars. They do not need to be so big like that, even 10 times faster than even a carriage. That leaves Alma very excited. But Blaze says that was not good, and asks if there is any problem to think at that moment. I'm a horse, and to be faster than a horse, that would break the entire militia. Thinking things could get worse, and now they ask if Blaze is worried about that he already has magic backpacks, perfect swords, and sweets. Common sense was something they could use there, as if it were the wind. Besides, being an adult means having your own life to not release that outside, so there would be no problem at all. She is 12 years old in the end, and obviously things would resolve easily because Maria Ail was around. Seriously, Blaze could not think of anything, so they will take care of the responsibilities too. Meanwhile, in the research place, Maria Ail was solving her alchemy problems, generating doubled water magic, adjusting the temperature, and extracting all medicines. Now the poison potions and any cure was perfect at that moment. Laylee gets lost and says a different type of potion needs double the synthesis than the previous others, and if making them at the same time, everything would be easier. The faster Maria Ail works, the more free time they get to have a calm life. I already said earlier that the time they spend alone was very important. Laylee says that could be true, but he was a bit afraid, thinking that if he tries to write 2 things at the same time with different hands, it would be as if he never could do that type of thing. Besides, they made quite a lot of potions, and at that moment Maria Ail says the potions are not intermediate or advanced, and there is much more to learn. However, that was only with the materials that are unavailable at the moment. Now, holy water does not need materials that can be made technically. However, that really was a difficult time for her. Next, Maria Ail asks Blaze if he saw any zombies recently. He asked why out of nowhere, and if Maria Ail believed in those undead things. So she says to forget it. As long as those 2 potions win, no one can neglect the main work. So nothing was there. It was time to do her hobby. That part was the calm life. The machines seemed to be very well, and they asked what Maria Ail would do after. She just made the design of a carriage without horses, and now they will exchange the horses for the things they were imagining. If they pull the carriage that way, it would be like running 60 kilometers per hour inside a coffin that cannot turn nor stop, and it was still 10 times faster than a carriage. It needs brakes or else, because you will not stop and will not be able to control the vibration, so it needs transmissions to be able to handle the steering wheel too. That seems it was really a job that was about to start, and exactly they were entering territories where the books will not help much and need miniatures and tests to move. If not, it is just on paper and in practice. Probably they will stay like that for a while. And honestly, Maria Ail wanted to finish that as soon as possible to move to the next thing she wanted to do. If they use the motor to generate a turbine, they can generate electricity. Batteries are easy to make with Alchemy, so that really could be done, helping electricity and giving more power to that. But now they cannot understand very well, but would be very excited for Maria Ail to be happy. Right at that moment, they needed to buy soap now, and also the world would turn easily because of Maria Ail's hobbies.